Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB, coming at you here on the 194th live chat of Robservations. Robservations, as you all know, is, of course, the show about something. And something is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And as you all know, if you go to their website at where, say it with me now, getluckytiger.com, and any stuff you order, and I particularly recommend the facial scrub and the all-over body wash. If I had a mustache or a beard, there's so much more to buy, but I don't, so I can't. But if you guys do, I suggest you use PGS when you check out for Post-Geek Singularity, our community, and you get 20% off your order. So that is pretty cool. First of all, there's a couple of things right off the top that I want to mention that sort of play into today's subject, which is, of course, the Watchmen. And as some of you might know, if you were here yesterday or the day before, one of my moderators, the great detective Jim Boyers, had one of his very good friends pass away. And Jim literally just came back from his funeral. And I wanted to say a few words. Jim wrote to us about his friend Bill. And Jim says, Bill wasn't just a friend. I called him brother all the time and loved him like one. We were actually next door neighbors for the first 12 years I lived in this house. I always knew he would be there for me if I needed him, and he knew he could always depend on me to do the same. We were constantly helping each other with stuff. The last thing I ever said to him was that I loved him and I'd hope we get to go see a movie or something soon. I would give anything for that to happen, and he was a great guy. He was expecting his first grandchild in September, and that is perhaps the most horrific thing of all. All he wanted was to make it to see her born. Life is cruel. Cancer sucks. There's nothing else to say. I found out right before I went on this show that a friend of mine also passed away today. His name was J. Neil Schulman. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him, but you might have seen he actually wrote one of the mid-'80s Twilight Zone episodes called Profile in Silver, which was another examination about an alternate look at what could have happened to JFK and the JFK assassination. And Andy Robinson, Garrick from Deep Space Nine, stars in that episode, along with Lane Smith. A great episode. He also wrote a tremendous book called Alongside Night. And Neil passed away from complications from a myocardial infarction, and he was born in 1953. He also, as a filmmaker, he took my example from Free Enterprise, and he made 2 feature films. He made a movie called Lady Magdalene's, which, to be honest, was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And we got into a big argument about it in my old office. And I told him this. I said, there's a much better movie here. And we got in a huge fight, and he screamed at me, and he said, Stanley Kubrick's not that good. Why do you think he's so great? And he stormed out of my office. He also made another movie. He adapted his own. Oh, by the way, Nichelle Nichols is in Lady Magdalene's. And he made another movie called Alongside Night, which is an adaptation of his novel that features Kevin Sorbo and Tim Russ and a couple other Star Trek alumni. But anyway, it's just strange. It just reminds me about, look, life is short and it's fleeting and we all take it for granted. And when people we love suddenly leave us, it is a stark reminder of the finite nature of our lives. And it never gets easy to lose people that we love. And so much has been written about them. So many songs, so many novels, so many stories, so many movies have dealt with the idea of people leaving us. It's one of those things. The idea that our lives will end is something that is really so many stories are about that very thing. And I think it's kind of appropriate that I was looking for a subject for today's topic of what I wanted to discuss. And I've been thinking a lot about the Watchmen. And of course, a lot of the Watchmen, even its name, has to do with time. And a lot of the Watchmen, the comic series, it had to do with potentially the end of civilization, mutually assured destruction, the finite nature of our lives. And one of my favorite things that I ever read, ever, was a distillation of why human life is so valuable. And that, of course, came from Dr. John Osterman, Dr. Manhattan, when he explains to Silk Spectre about the nature of human life, the thermodynamic miracle of life, and how amazing it is that any of us exist at all. And I remember when I read that in the Watchmen comic, even though it was in the pages of a comic, it was one of the most revelatory things I've ever. To have human life distilled into literally into scientific terms, but in the same moment, speak to the wonder of not just human life, but really all life, but especially human life. And it was very uplifting, for a comic that was drenched in dread and drenched in existential terror, as Watchmen was, to find something so incredibly uplifting. And it became indeed a massive plot point in the story. It was interesting. I mean, and Watchmen, as I've moved through my life, Watchmen is now 33 years old, I think. As I've moved through my life, the comic book Watchmen never left me. The story has never left me. It's something I've thought about a lot. And it's funny, the various characters in Watchmen, specifically the comedian, Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, those three characters, I always find myself thinking about things that were either, I can't say they were said. I guess you can say they were said if you've seen the movie and you didn't read the comic, but there's so much in that comic that has been a part of my life as I've moved through it. Watchmen has existed more than half my life, so it's always been something that has been with me, and it's one of those things that it's a big part of my life. And the whole thing about Watchmen that's so baked into the concept is the idea of time, and obviously the passage of time. How we measure time. Clockwork is a big part of that series. And also the fact that at any one moment, the doomsday clock might hit midnight, and that is the end. And this week, we hear about yet another nuclear disaster in Russia that's being covered up now. I'm sure it'll come out soon when they can no longer cover the radiation plume or wherever it's going, and they'll have to admit, it's funny watching Chernobyl on TV and then seeing something very similar to it happen again. It's probably not the first time. And I think I've just been thinking about Watchmen, and what I'm going to talk about further, it's something I wanted to talk about a couple weeks ago when it was first breaking, but I didn't. I saw other channels discuss it, but I figured it would be something that we could discuss. And also, since I received a letter from someone, one of our viewers, I figured, why not share it all? But to begin with, I want to read an article. I need to read an article first, and the article actually comes from Deadline. I had it called up here, and now let's see. Here it is. So, as many of you know, for those of you who don't know, if you don't know, I'll just give you a brief recap of what Watchmen is. Watchmen started out as a 12-issue limited series, actually a series with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it was, of course, written by famously Alan Moore. And Alan Moore had already been an up-and-coming voice in comics. He'd written for 2000 AD in Britain, and he wrote things like V for Vendetta. And then when he came to America, he made a big splash on Swamp Thing, beginning with his story like The Anatomy Lesson. And he clearly he came out of the gate as one of the great comic writers of all time. And he's become a novelist. Most recently, he wrote a tome that it's like a brick. You could build a house with it. Jerusalem was the last novel he wrote. I highly recommend that book. It's very worthwhile. It's a dense read, but worth reading. But Watchmen was basically, originally, DC Comics had acquired characters from Charlton, characters like The Question and Captain Atom. And originally, Alan Moore was going to take these characters and write a sort of self-contained story about them. But then the editorial board at DC at the time said, no, we're gonna keep these characters and incorporate them. So what Alan Moore did was he kind of created like characters to the Charlton characters, similar characters. So instead of Captain Atom, we had Dr. Manhattan, and things. Instead of the Question, we had Rorschach. And so he created these characters and basically told a story that examined the very idea of superheroes, and indeed through a lens of social commentary, of history, of pop culture, of literature. Alan Moore is an incredibly intelligent man, and his command of classic literature and of news of the day and of pop culture, probably one of the most learned men, one of the most educated men and knowledgeable men who's ever written comics. And that was apparent in every page of The Watchmen. You could read it as a standard superhero story, or you could see it for what it was. It truly was a piece of literature, one of the great pieces of literature of the latter half of the 20th century, I dare say. Also, it was a complete deconstruction of superheroics and the comic book medium, and indeed, even the audience. The comic audience was deconstructed within the pages of the Watchmen comic. And it was the work of such a keen and sharp intellect that there is no way, it's never been surpassed. There's never been a superhero comic ever that comes remotely close. Now, since then, since the publication of Watchmen, it was basically left alone. But because it was such a moneymaker for DC, it's constantly being exploited so they can retain the rights. I mean, DC doesn't want to lose the rights to Watchmen, so it was constantly in publication. It was reprinted. Graffiti Designs did an edition of it. Of course, there's a beautiful absolute version of Watchmen that I have that's much bigger, so you can enjoy the artwork. And there was Before Watchmen, a series called Before Watchmen, where various comic creators came in, and that was pretty hit and miss, but there's some good stuff in there. And then, of course, famously, Jeff Johns has been writing Doomsday Clock, which I think crassly incorporates the Watchmen characters into the DC universe, which probably makes Alan Moore's gums bleed. And if not his gums, probably his brain weep. Because that's about the last thing in the world that the Watchmen characters their fate should never have been to be incorporated into the DC universe. That is such a bastardization of what the whole concept is, but I understand why they did it. And I have been reading Doomsday Clock, and to me, I've greatly enjoyed Jeff Johns as a comic writer. I really liked his run on Green Lantern and Aquaman, and some of the Justice League stuff he's written, and of course Teen Titans. I have many of his omnibuses that I own. His work on Doomsday Clock has been, as a comic book, it's been fine. I've actually quite enjoyed a lot of it, but it falls woefully short when it's compared to Watchmen. And inexplicably to me, they've used the Watchmen design. They designed Doomsday Clock to look like Watchmen, so it looks like it's part of the whole thing, which I find, in a way, borderline offensive, quite frankly. I mean, they didn't even try to come up with their own iconography. They just used the iconography from the Watchmen series that, of course, was all part of the genius of that comic. And it just, to me, it feels like, look, I get it. I understand. Corporate America, Alan Moore, he made his bed. He made the deals he made. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. It ain't show friends. It's show business. Well, there's nothing that's more indicative of that than Watchmen. Now, of course, we famously saw Zack Snyder adapt Watchmen onto the silver screen. Now, I will say, I quite enjoyed seeing a lot of the comic brought to life. The problem that I had with the Watchmen comic is that it is a recreation rather than an adaptation. It has a slavish fealty to the comic book itself, and unfortunately, it's a very superficial recreation of the comic. And I've talked about this before. There are things about the movie that also really make me want to punch the screen. For instance, there's a Vietnam sequence where we see the comedian and Dr. Manhattan in Vietnam. It's a Vietnam flashback. And in the movie, they use Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries from the Ring of the Nibelung cycle. And that is, of course, a direct reference to Francis Coppola's Apocalypse Now. And when Francis Coppola used Wagner in Apocalypse Now, he was making a statement, and it was part of his own Vietnam phantasmagoria to use that piece of music. So when Zack Snyder chooses to open his Vietnam sequence with helicopters and using Ride of the Valkyries, what you're doing is now you're evoking the movie Apocalypse Now, which I guess an argument can be made that that's sort of what Alan Moore was doing by making literary allusions and using pop culture or musical references such as All Along the Watchtower, things like that. However, when in Watchmen, when you're directly referencing something that is it hadn't happened yet, and it's just a strange, it didn't work for me. Let me put it that way. It didn't work for me. It felt really rudimentary, and it felt like something I would have done in the 7th grade and thought it was profound. But when I was watching in the movie, I'm like, man, methinks someone doesn't quite understand what's going on here. And I felt that was the case throughout the movie. It was nice to watch, and there's a lot of people that will talk about there's a huge alteration that's made to the end of the film, that the movie actually might have a better ending than the comic book itself. That's debatable. I think that's debatable. But it was on one hand, I really enjoyed seeing it all come to life. But on the other hand, I'll give you another example. There's 3 different versions of Watchmen on home video. There's the theatrical version, there's the director's cut, and then there's the ultimate edition. And famously in Watchmen, there is a peripheral character that is reading pirate comic books, specifically a pirate comic book throughout the film, because there are no superhero comics, because there are superheroes in real life in the Watchmen universe. So in the ultimate version of Watchmen, there's an animated sequence that shows you a character is actually reading a comic, a pirate comic in the movie. I mean, in the comic. In the comic book, a character is reading a comic book about pirates. That is also an allusion to certain comics and certain comic artists. But when they did this for the movie, they actually turned it into an animated sequence, which in my mind is very strange, because this character is reading this comic, and if you're not making the allusions back to the comic book medium the way you were in the comic book, so you're recreating through animation a static art form, but because it's a movie, you're recreating the animation, which is in itself, in a film context, doesn't work, because the whole point of including the pirate comic is lost if you're not reading it in a comic book. So I felt that was sort of a real problem with the movie, in that they were adapting this comic, and Zack Snyder, in his desire to show great honor and respect to what was done, it didn't work to me. It's like, you can't. Another thing that really bothered me in the movie, of course, when Watchmen came out, we were barely a decade away from America leaving Vietnam, and we were barely a decade away from the resignation of Richard Nixon. So when Nixon is serving his 4th term as president in the comic, and you're dealing with the Cold War and the fact that in the 80s, mutually assured destruction and the escalation of tension between the Soviet Union and the United States made perfect sense. And in the context of the comic, it really worked. And you understood the iconography of the doomsday clock. And watching the movie, I think all of that was lost on audiences. And through adaptation, again, I don't know how. I read an earlier draft by Batman screenwriter Sam Hamm that I thought that Terry Gilliam was going to direct, that I thought did a pretty good job. It was it was truly an adaptation. So the movie, while I enjoy some of it, I feel that it falls very short as a film, because it's a recreation as opposed to an adaptation. And a lot of the film just doesn't work. You're watching it going, why is this included? Why was it not updated? What is the 2000s version of Watchmen? Because when you're watching the film, if you're a film goer that doesn't know anything about the comic and you're watching this movie, I think a lot of that iconography, that Cold War iconography and that Nixon iconography is lost. It doesn't make sense. You're watching it going, why is Nixon a president now? Because you need to know all about Nixon's history, and I guess that can work, but does it work? Is it universal? In 50 years, is anybody going to be able to watch that movie and understand? Of course, maybe you could say the same thing about the comic book. But anyway, that brings me to the subject at hand. HBO, as many of you know, we've seen trailers and a teaser and a trailer now. HBO is going to air a Watchmen miniseries, a 9-episode Watchmen miniseries, rather than say, oh, I don't know, make the Sandman series, which could have run 7 seasons. Netflix is making the Sandman series. The Sandman being my favorite ongoing comic book of all time because it's truly a story about storytelling. I love the Sandman. The Watchmen is probably my favorite limited series, if not my favorite superhero story of all time. But as a child of 80s comics that lived through the great comic renaissance of the 80s, and when I was reading things like Frank Miller's Ronin, or I was reading Howard Chaykin's American Flag, when I finally got to see things like when Watchmen came out, even Crisis on Infinite Earths, and everything that was going on at the time, the just this explosion of how comics sort of broke through not just into the mainstream, but also they became truly literary, and they started to have great respect. Comics had respect in other countries, but not so much in America. But they really did, that renaissance and reading. It's hard to explain to people now that weren't there or weren't comic readers. I was in that sweet spot, high school and college for me was right when these comics were really, Watchmen was coming out right after I left high school and was in college. So it was a time when it was very influential in my own life. But if you're born after that, and you're told that Watchmen is classic and you read it, so much of that material has been mined and used and seen in other mediums and in various ways. It might not, you read Watchmen and go, well, that was good, but at the time it came out, it was so revolutionary. And there's an issue of Watchmen, I think it's issue 5, called Fearful Symmetry, that reads the same forward and back, at least the panel design is the same forward and back, which played with your expectations of not only the comic book medium, but the very comic you were holding was in fact sort of a Rorschach test. It was so well, everything about Watchmen was so well designed and so well considered and truly a marvel. But so now this HBO series is coming out. And this HBO series is a sequel to the comic, not the movie. It's a sequel to the comic. And it's, of course, being overseen and showrun by Damon Lindelof, a man that's brought you Lost, a man that's brought you Star Trek, a man that's brought you The Leftovers, the HBO series The Leftovers, based on the Tom Peretta Tom novel. I'd read the book, and the 3 seasons of The Leftovers was a show that I watched. I watched it. Everything I hate about the J.J. Abrams clan of mystery box storytelling was in that show. And it just, while I will say I did like the way it ended, I thought the whole show, I just wanted to yell at the screen. Damon Lindelof also came in and started to rewrite John Spates and is predominantly responsible for what Prometheus wound up as. And Prometheus is another, I think, brain dead film. And one of the things that I would say that drives me crazy about I would say the J.J. Abrams school. I mean, I'm a Drew Goddard fan, but when you've got Lindelof and you've got Kurtzman and you've got JJ himself, I feel like these are guys that haven't read very many books. So there's not a lot of literature going on in what they write. And they've seen a lot of TV and a lot of movies, but we don't get a lot of depth. But anyway, so this And I don't mean to pillory. Look, I can't wait to see the Watchmen TV series on HBO. I can't wait to watch it. I'm expecting it to be a spectacular car wreck, a slow motion car crash where the glass is kind of like the beginning of Deadpool, where you watch the glass flying and everything that's in the car in slow motion. I feel like that's what Watchmen is going to be. And everything that Damon Lindelof has ever said about the upcoming Watchmen television show, it makes my brain weep. It does. And I'm going to read you. He was talking at the Television Critics Association, and this was reported by Dominic Patton in Deadline on July 24th. And the headline to this article in Deadline is Watchmen confronts white supremacy without grandiose solutions, says Damon Lindelof at the TCA. After dropping an Easter egg-rich new Watchmen trailer during the spotlight of Comic-Con, Damon Lindelof today tore right into the heart of the upcoming HBO series based on Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' classic late 80s comic. What in 2019 is the equivalent of the nuclear standoff between the Americans and the Russians, the sometimes punchy Leftovers co-creator postulated during the Watchmen panel at TCA on Wednesday? It is race and the police, Lindelof said. Answering his own question as star Regina King and EP director Nicole Cassell, both Leftovers alums, sat next to him on stage at the Beverly Hilton. There is no defeating white supremacy. It's not going away, executive producer Lindelof explained of the hate groups that populate the 9-episode Watchmen. There are no easy answers and grandiose solution, he added, noting this was not going to play out like your standard superheroes saga on the small or big screen. Set to debut in October, the Tulsa-based series focuses on King as a police officer in a world where cops wear masks. The Jeremy Irons-portrayed Ozymandias is in seclusion. A very liberal Robert Redford is the longest-serving POTUS ever. There are no internet or smartphones, and a killer cult has grown up around the now-dead Rorschach. It's not supposed to be a world that you recognize to Trojan horse themes that are in the real world in a fictional one, Lindelof asserted of his 2019 show. What is actual history and what is alt history, and things start to get blended in the middle. Keeping things circumspect, Lindelof fielded a lot of questions about Watchmen, the series connect to Watchmen, the classic comic. We're not going to mess with it. It's canon, he declared of the 12-issue run from 86 to 87. However, Lindelof did admit his relationship with the notoriously prickly and private Moore, Alan Moore, who has kept to his long ago announced intention to have nothing to do with adaptations of his work. As some may have noticed, Moore is not mentioned in any of HBO's press materials on the series, with only Gibbons noted as co-creator. It's an ongoing wrestling match, Lindelof revealed candidly, of feelings about Moore's feelings about Watchmen adaptations such as his. Yet, linking Moore and his work to the DIY spirit of first-generation punk rock, Lindelof also said his attitude in the best spirit of V for Vendetta creator Moore is, fuck you guys, I'm doing it anyway. Set in an America where superheroes are outlaws and the radiated Dr. Manhattan still lives on the moon. Did he live on the moon? The loaded cast of Watchmen includes King, Irons, Don Johnson, Gene Smart, Tim Blake Nelson, Louis Gossett Jr., Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Hong Chow, Andrew Howard, Tom Misen, Francis Fisher, Jacob Ming Trent, Sarah Vickers, Dylan Schloming, and James Wolk. By the way, an incredible cast. I'll give you that. An incredible cast. First of all, there's so much wrong in the few paragraphs of what Damon Lindelof is saying that I can't even begin. First of all, the idea that, okay, I get it. You know, Robert Redford is our longest running president. To be honest, hearing that, I'm out. I'm out the door. I get it. Okay, you got to make allusions to Ronald Reagan. I understand where you're coming from. But Robert Redford, see, when Alan Moore decided to make Richard Nixon a president that now had served 4 terms, that makes sense. That makes sense from a historical standpoint, a political standpoint. There's many things right then and there that I'm like, okay, I get it. Alan Moore is making many comments about society at large, about America, about our system of government, about what does it say about the American people reelecting Nixon after, maybe Watergate didn't happen. But what Alan Moore was saying about having Nixon run 4 terms or win 4 terms, there's a lot to unpack there. But making Robert Redford the president, the longest running president of the United States, to my mind, first of all, Robert Redford is not that. Immediately, I'm like, okay, you don't get it. You're not getting it. I get where they're like, who could be elected? Okay. And you just throw that name out there. And then, okay, you're now equating that white supremacy is this equivalent of mutually assured destruction, meaning the planetary destruction of our biosphere through nuclear conflict. But white supremacy is being equated to the destruction of the earth. I don't know. I was talking with moderator, the Honorable Mike Bodden, the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa, earlier today about, I wonder how the Indians or the Chinese feel about white supremacy. What is the largest English-speaking nation in the world we were talking about? India. So why don't we speak like Indians do? I mean, there's already these comments just they drive me crazy, because I feel like, we're living in a world now where we're getting such great, thoughtful entertainment. And there's a reason why Stanley Kubrick is my favorite film director, because like Alan Moore, Stanley Kubrick is an incredibly well-educated man. He had an encyclopedic command of classic literature, actually of all different kinds of things. He was a documentary filmmaker. He was a photographer. He started as a photographer for Look magazine in his teens. He was a keen observer of human behavior. So when you see a Stanley Kubrick movie, whether you like Kubrick's films or not, the level of intellect, the level of understanding by the filmmaker is immense. And we as audience members, we might never know what he's alluding to, or we might never know what he's taking. I saw somebody comparing The Shining when Jack Nicholson was smashing through the door to the Phantom Carriage, the movie The Phantom Carriage. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. There's something I learned every day. But I feel like when a guy like Damon Lindelof is saying these things, it makes me think to myself, there's no reason to watch this show, because if you're equating, if the Robert Redford character is supposed to, be what you're following up Nixon, because Nixon served 4 terms, because if the comic is canon, and I get it, they're trying to draw a line to Ronald Reagan and all of that, but Robert Redford, the man who founded the Sundance Institute, who stuck up for independent rights and all that. I mean, it just doesn't work, especially if you're going to talk about white supremacy. But anyway, I mean, I don't want to say I'm going to check out right there, but it makes me want to check out right there, because I just feel like the thought that we're being, and the fact that it's about white supremacy at all, that's what we're dealing with. It seems so small-minded. I mean, we're talking about a comic that was dealing with the end of the world and God. What would happen if a man became a god and was losing his grip slowly on what it meant to be a human being, when you can see the construction of the universe through the atoms, or you're dealing with huge, large issues. And I just feel that already what I'm hearing from the showrunner, and having seen Prometheus and having seen The Leftovers and having watched Lost, I just feel like a Watchmen show deserves the kind of intellect that it doesn't seem to be getting here. Now, again, I don't know Damon Lindelof. I just know him through his work and what he said. And when he says things like, oh, in the punk rock spirit of V for Vendetta, fuck you guys, I'm doing it anyway. Well, there's a lot of respect for Alan Moore right there. And I'm sure Damon Lindelof, being a member of the emergent punk scene in London, you know, that kind of, it's such a, it's just, I would hope, I want more from our creators. Now, I would kill to work on anything David Lindelof's worked on, maybe not kill, but I would have loved to have done it. You know, and I if I'm ever allowed to work in a writer's room, I mean, I've not sought out that kind of job, nor have I been writing TV episodes or anything like that. I've written 3 screenplays in my life, one of which was produced. Hopefully the second one might be at some point. The third one has sort of passed its time. It was supposed to be made in the early part, the early part of the aughts. It was an adaptation of a book called Nevermind Nirvana by Mark Lindquist, if anyone's interested. And Gavin Newsom's wife wanted to make it with me at one point. So it was a great screenplay, if I do say so myself, but it was, of course, based on a book. But anyway, I read this stuff and it just makes me sad because once again, Alan Moore is going to be strip mined by lesser minds. And I feel that that's what, I mean, look, Alan Moore, he's been adapted. From Hell was taken from him. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was, oh my God, taken from him. V for Vendetta, which is pretty respectable, actually. There goes Elizabeth, ladies and gentlemen. She walked through the frame. She didn't even say hello. Hi. There she says hello. It's just amazing. And of course, Watchmen, Swamp Thing, a lot of things have been adapted. Poor Alan Moore. No wonder he just said, I don't want my name on anything. My favorite is most recently his run of Miracle Man, which I love, the comic Miracle Man. I think the collected comic that Marvel put out says by the original writer. It doesn't even say his name on it. It's quite distressing. But anyway, that brings me now. First of all, let me see what anyone has to say in the chat, because I've been going on and on and on. And I saw some people had some things to say. Cardinal Sin is here. Cardinal Sin says, good evening, Notorious. How are you doing tonight? I'm doing well. I'm going to dinner with the Entons, the Ent twins, my friends Gary and Edmund. Whenever their parents come into town, they take us out to dinner to the Smokehouse right across from Warner Brothers, one of my favorite restaurants in LA. But they always take us out, and I love their parents are great. And I'm really looking forward to, we have been playing a game called Cast the Stand, meaning The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand. Gary, Edmund, and I, we love Mick Garris's miniseries of The Stand. It is imperfect. It was made for very little money. Well, not very little money, but it was made on a low budget, shot on 16 millimeter, visual effects done, composited on video. But we love The Stand for all of its imperfections. I love the book. It's probably all things being equal, for the page count, when I read the 827 page Signet paperback edition, because I never had the hardcover, and then when I read in 1990 the unexpurgated, the expanded version, The Stand is one of my favorite books I've ever read. Loved it. So we of course know that CBS All Access is finally making the miniseries. But Gary and Edmund and Alvin, their dad, we have been playing Cast the Stand for years. Whenever we get together, we talk about who we would cast in various roles. And tonight, for the very first time, we actually have people that have been cast in The Stand, so we can go from there. So I'm very excited tonight. So that's how I'm doing. Very excited to go to dinner at the Smokehouse tonight with the Entons, the whole Enton clan. They come out from Florida. Gary and Edmund live here. I edited a film that remains unreleased that Gary and Edmund wrote it, Gary directed, called My 11th, that I would love to see get released because I think it's pretty great. And it's about the day in the life of a serial killer. Joseph Eric says, when are we having the group video live chat? Joseph, I don't know yet. I'm working on that. The 200th episode of Robservations is, in fact, 6 days from today, a week from yesterday. CJ Dunn, thank you for supporting the channel, CJ. I actually love the Watchmen movie. I'm eagerly anticipating the Watchmen series, and I hope it doesn't suck. All that aside, still waiting on the so-called surprise you've been dangling like a carrot. Still love you, Rob. Yes, that surprise, I got to get back into it. I got to get back into that. You are correct, CJ. Alexander Wilson is here, longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community and an imagination connoisseur par excellence. Alexander Wilson says, alleged white supremacist Richard Spencer gave a speech where he preaches genocide of people of color, and he was cheered. That horrified me. Yeah, the funny thing about well, I guess there's really nothing funny about white supremacist Richard Spencer and being raised Jewish. I've met a lot of people who actually survived an attempted genocide. And I've never understood that, because there's less white people on the world, on this globe, than there are brown people. And eventually, if you're going to start some kind of a genocide, you're going to run into a wall. But one of the real problems, I think, and I've said it before, white supremacists are, you got to go back to the Clive Barker rule, the Clive Barker Books of Blood rule of humanity, which is that we are all books of blood. Whenever we're opened, we're read, which I always loved. I mean, I just think, you know, based on where your ancestry, which part of the world you come from, based on your environment. So you might have different muscles or more melanin in your skin than someone else, or you're whiter or yellower or redder or whatever color. It's so stupid, because whenever you're cut from, whenever we're opened up, we all look the same on the inside. So that superficiality, you know, white supremacy to me is just, they're a bunch of superficial idiots. And they always have been. I mean, the idea that you're going to go after somebody or dislike somebody because of the color of their skin is completely wrong-headed and stupid to me. You should much rather be, I would totally be an elitist. I dislike people because they're not smart or they don't like the same movies. No, I'm just kidding. I find white supremacy to be ludicrous. I mean, come on, you lose. You always lose. White supremacists always lose. And what are you going to do? It's so crazy. What are you going to do in your genetic traits? When people say white, like how white? Are you going to like do genetic tests on everybody, and everybody has to be, what if you're white and you have Neanderthal genes in your DNA? Like, does that mean you also get, are you subject to genocide if you're a Neanderthal? I mean, white people and black people and all different kinds of people can have a Neanderthal bit in them. So what does that mean? You know, what about those white people that have ancestry of different, you know, races, which I think is so stupid. You know, honestly, Alexander, we need to stop referring to, I long for the day when we stop referring to people about so-and-so as a different race than I am. We're not fucking different races. You know, there are of course genetic differences in all forms of people on the earth. There are, but we're all one species. We're all one race of people. We're the human race. And I do long for a day when we will all be considered that, because, you know, the Watchmen was definitely about that. The Watchmen was about the human race. Dr. Manhattan wasn't just talking about white people when he talked about the thermodynamic miracle of life. He was talking about every inhabitant on the planet Earth. And that's what drives me crazy, is that this new Watchmen show, we're equating the potential Cold War and the destruction of the planet Earth, we're now equating to white supremacy. And is Rorschach Rorschach hated everybody equally. Rorschach, I don't think Rorschach was racist. So if they're going to make the army of Rorschach white supremacists, that's going to be kind of weird, because I think Rorschach had disdain for most of humanity. I think Rorschach was an equal opportunity hater, but that's just me. Anyway, Cal Kamel or Camel, I don't know I think it's Cal Kamel. By the way, Cal Kamel from Swag Props. I've got it right here. I just got a plug. Cal sent me this as a gift. He sent me his reproduction of The Nine Gates, the book from Roman Polanski's film The Ninth Gate, which is probably the coolest thing anyone's ever sent me in my entire life. It is so cool. I love it so much. I just thought I would throw that out there. But Cal, Swag Props, go to his Etsy store and marvel. Look at his book he's making. Look at his Dr. Jones, Henry Jones, his Grail Diary from Indiana Jones on the Last Crusade. Check that out, son or daughter. You guys are going to want that. It's so cool. Anyway, Cal says, Swag Prop says, "Hi, Rob. I wrote this letter to you sometime in July, but it probably got lost during the brute force attack on the Burnettwork website. It was also written before the latest batch of trailers aired during San Diego Comic-Con, so I decided to update the contents of the letter after having seen those trailers. I'm writing to you about Watchmen. Is there any doubt it is the greatest graphic novel ever written or drawn? Probably not. It's been 30 years since it was published, and I still consider it the best I've ever read. Me too. I was 13 when the first issue came out, and I was totally blown away by what I read. Having been on a steady diet of such titles like Superman, Justice League, Spider-Man, and the X-Men before that, which are often optimistic and fantastic in nature, I was unprepared for the bleakness of the world in which the characters of Watchmen occupied. What fascinated me about the story is that it works on a multitude of levels. Yes. On the most basic level, it is a murder mystery, and the reader follows Rorschach's investigation into that murder as he uncovers clues and red herrings until everything comes together with a twist spectacularly at the end without feeling contrived. On another level, it deconstructs what we've come to understand as the superhero genre prior to that, as we are introduced to costume characters who carry a lot of emotional and psychological baggage, making them relatable to and understandable by the reader. From an illustrative point of view, Watchmen is a work of art. Dave Gibbons' artwork is rich with symbolism, color, and symmetry, and is able to withstand the test of time. Cut to 2009 in Zack Snyder's adaptation. Despite Alan Moore himself saying Watchmen could only work in a comic and they had no interest in seeing Snyder's adaptation, I actually thought the film, the director's cut to be exact, was a masterpiece. In fact, I think it's Snyder's best work to date. His slavish attention to detail and recreating the panels of the graphic novel showed his tremendous respect for the source material. It honored the story, the characters, and many of the complex themes and social commentary that Moore had in the comic. Sure, he changed the climactic threat to humanity, but I was actually okay with it and understood the rationale behind it. And lest we forget, the casting of Jackie Earle Haley was inspired, and his portrayal of Rorschach is a highlight of the movie. Which brings us to the present. HBO will soon air the Watchmen miniseries, which is not an adaptation of the graphic novel, but rather an entirely new story set in the world where the events of the original storyline took place. One thing to note is that it's supposed to be a sequel of the graphic novel, not the Snyder movie adaptation, with such names as Jeremy Irons as an older Ozymandias, Regina King, Don Johnson, and even Robert Redford, and expected appearances of Dr. Manhattan and the Silk Spectre. It sure sounds like it will be something to behold. The trailer released at San Diego Comic-Con makes it look interesting at the very least. I will agree with you there. It does look interesting, and I do want to watch it. Probably before I go bang my head on the kitchen sink, but we'll see. Then why is the anticipation for it lukewarm so far? All my comic book geek acquaintances, myself included, welcome the announcement of the new miniseries with a big meh. Could it be this is yet another one of those sequels that nobody asked for? Absolutely it is. Or is it because of who has been tasked with creating and developing the show, i.e. J.J. Abrams' collaborator Damon Lindelof? Absolutely. 2 + 2 = 0 interest. Like Abrams, Lindelof is fond of the mystery box approach to filmmaking, which amounts to raising a lot of questions with few or any answers. Just look at Lost, which showed a lot of promise in the first couple of seasons as more and more mysteries were introduced, only to be left unanswered in the totally unsatisfying final season. Probably, as I like to say, the worst betrayal of an audience in the history of television. But I digress. Similarly, Ridley Scott's Prometheus, which Lindelof also co-wrote, is a film awash in mysteries. In it, we have two scientists who discover mysterious cave drawings on Earth that show a large alien creature pointing to a distant galaxy. Prometheus isn't interested in rich characterizations or anything incidental to the mysteries, so the next scene of the film is the two scientists en route to that distant galaxy with an assorted crew, each one mysterious on their own accord, and monumentally stupid. Prometheus has the dumbest group of scientists ever assembled in a science fiction film. I mean, the blue-collar crew of the Nostromo are all PhD students compared to all the scientists on the Prometheus. Again, I digress. As they arrive at their destination, they face even more mysteries. This has got to be the worst formulation of the mystery box approach. Question on top of question with nothing else of substance, leading again to a totally unsatisfying ending. I have to say, I haven't seen Lindelof's The Leftovers, so I can't comment on whether it is any good or similarly unsatisfying? Well, I'll tell you, I watched every episode. I watched it with glee. Well, I don't know what that tells you, but it's true. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Rob. Are you waiting for the miniseries with bated breath, or are you, like me, filled with trepidation that Lindelof will bring his trademark style to the miniseries to the detriment of the Watchmen brand? Yours sincerely, Cal K, a.k.a. Swag Props. Once again, I would like to point everybody to Swag Props' Etsy store. Check it out. P.S. I just found out The Hunt is written by Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. Maybe it's a blessing that it got canceled. I think it's by Carlton Cruse's son, I think. Maybe it's a blessing that it got canceled because the story would probably have been riddled with lots and lots of unanswered questions, which would have frustrated audiences. Yes, I do not believe when you're telling a story to an audience, you should be intentionally sort of obtuse, or not obtuse. Just why not let an audience, tell your story, know your story. I always get the feeling when I'm watching a Damon Lindelof story, they don't know the answers. And with Lost, that was readily apparent. They just offered more questions, and you as an audience are going, hey man, like I've said before on the show, are the characters ever going to sit down and at least acknowledge the fact they've traveled through time and how amazing that is, or not? And they never do. And I think watching Damon Lindelof as a dramatist, the things that he's written have caused me nothing but intellectual pain, and not in a good way. So I've talked a lot about Watchmen. Obviously, I'm not the only person who thinks this way, but I really think that it makes me sad that HBO didn't decide to make Sandman, and instead Netflix did, when Netflix has a habit of canceling things 3 seasons in. Also, I think Netflix is turning into a big risk, and I wonder if Netflix will even be around long enough to adapt the entire Sandman storyline. I doubt that. I'm not sure. I have a bad feeling about Netflix. We'll see where we are next year. But with their stock price and their subscriber rates, we'll see. And Disney Plus on the horizon, I don't know. It does bum me out, this Watchmen show. But again, I do appreciate the attempt to do something new and unique, but I really don't like it when Damon Lindelof comes out, the very creator, and says, "What?" and says, "Fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Fuck what Alan Moore might want." In the spirit of V for Vendetta and punk rock, fuck Alan Moore. In a way, J.J. Abrams said the same thing about Star Trek, and I don't understand why these guys. Why they feel the need to sort of take away. I don't know what the word would be. I don't know the concept, but the idea that you're somehow going to improve or make Watchmen yours. Watchmen will never be yours. It's not yours. It's Alan Moore's, and I guess it's DC Comics, and it's whatever Warner Brothers wants to do with it. But I really don't like. I don't like this attitude they have. I really don't. I don't think it's the way to make great genre cinema. Willow Yang says she watched The Wrath of Khan. Thumbs up for Wrath of Khan. Really enjoyed it. That is amazing. I can't wait to read what you have to say about Wrath of Khan. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's a great film. I can't wait to see what you have to say. Wade O'Neill is here. Wade says, The Boys has satisfied my appetite as far as a violent alternative take on superhero genre, where the heroes are less than super people. So if Watchmen sucks, it'll be less of a blow. Well, I'll tell you, I think there wouldn't be The Boys if Watchmen was never written. I would consider it to be, there are so many comics that have been influenced by Watchmen, everything from The Authority to The Boys, which that makes sense, right? But yes, I think that Watchmen is the most influential comic book ever written. I think Watchmen and The Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Rises. Did I say Dark Knight Rises? I did, didn't I? I meant to say The Dark Knight Returns, not The Dark Knight Rises. I did watch a nice video on The Dark Knight Rises, though, today that was an appreciation and a look back at the film that says it's probably, for all of its faults, I think Dark Knight Rises is a pretty great, worthy film. It just has a lot of weird logic lapses that don't make any sense, and they make me pull my teeth out when I watch it. But Yes, Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns are two of the most influential comics in comic book history, at least for American superhero comics, and still are. Cardinal Sin says he likes the ending of the movie more than the book. Yeah, I thought the ending of the book was, I'll be honest, it was a little weird, but I get what he was doing. I understand like how he was referring back to something that was also a part of pop culture, and the idea if the lie is big enough, then people will believe it. I mean, even though it's based on an old Outer Limits episode, The Architects of Fear, the idea was sound, and I see what he was doing there. Whereas from a plot standpoint and a character standpoint, what they did with the Watchmen movie, I think makes more sense in terms of a film, because again, it's not so, you have to make a lot of leaps with the end of Watchmen, and for a drama, it might be a little too many. So there's a lot of people that feel that way, and I don't necessarily disagree. I like the end of the movie is one of the things I like the most because it's adapting the comic as opposed to recreating the comic. Another thing I really think they missed the mark on in the movie is the character of Ozymandias. Adrian Veidt was, I think, one of my favorite characters in the comic, and I think they really Matthew Good, I love him as an actor, totally playing the part the wrong way. I remember at some point they were talking about Tom Cruise playing Ozymandias, which would have been great. I mean, can you imagine if Tom Cruise with his Tom Cruise persona, like, hey, with this toothy grin and everything was great, and he's a captain of industry and he's really flamboyant, Matthew Good looked like he was up to no good the whole movie. And he was like a space cadet. And I just did not I liked everyone else, but I didn't like Matthew Good's portrayal of Ozymandias at all. I thought it was the complete wrong way to go. Anyway, that's just me. What do you guys think? Mark C is here. Mark C is back. Hello, Mark C. How are you? Mark C says, Watchmen seems to play in the base fears that come from reading headlines, but being too lazy to research info. Emotion without thought. I find such forms of entertainment potentially dangerous. Are you talking about the movie? Because I don't feel that way about the comic. I think the comic goes a lot deeper than that. Although it does use, of course, it actually uses the idea of headlines exactly that way. And of course, there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it that Howard Chaykin did in American Flag before Alan Moore. In terms of media, using the media that has later been picked up in things like RoboCop, was also used in the Watchmen film. But I don't know. Are you saying that about the comic? I feel that way about the movie. Anyway, got a lot of letters to read here, and wow, I've been going on this for a long time, which is pretty great. I like this letter. This letter comes from Luke Beckett, and this is a good one. Hi, Rob. Thanks for reading most of my letters, and thanks for providing a forum where discussion of film, television, and fandom can be done in a thoughtful, civil way. Film appreciation is something that I hold near to my heart since I do have a degree in it from Mel Hoppenheim School of Cinema in Montreal, Canada. I spent 4 years in film school studying and analyzing movies, and I miss the days where I would sit in a room full of, in your words, imagination connoisseurs and just talk movies. Well, that's what this is for. That's what Robservations is for. Actually, talk is too small a word for what we did to movies. We dissected movies. Once we were done with them, there was nothing left. But it was done in a thoughtful academic manner. Nobody was ever disrespected for having a differing opinion. In fact, we welcomed it. Because how boring is it to have a discussion if everybody agrees? It is much more interesting to have a differing opinion and see where we can join up. Also, nobody was ever wrong. How can you be wrong for liking or hating a movie? Oh, you can be wrong. Your life experience is what brings you to like or dislike something, and since your life experience is obviously different from mine, then obviously you won't like the same things I will, and that includes movies. That does not mean, however, that you can't analyze a movie and point out what does and does not work. I would add, does not work for you. Also, is it possible to like a bad movie and dislike a good movie? Case in point, Rocky 4 and 5. People always say how they loved Rocky 4 and hated Rocky 5. However, when I point out how Rocky 5 is a better movie, they get a glaze over their eyes. But I'm serious. Rocky IV is a series of music montages stuck together by the thinness of storylines about Apollo Creed getting killed in the ring when he fights Russian Ivan Drago. Ivan Drago, I must break you. To prove that Americans are better than the Russians. Rocky steps out of retirement because he's got to do what he's got to do. And not only wins the fight, but also ends the Cold War. It barely has enough storyline to make a full movie. I agree, by the way, with everything you just said. This is proven right in the middle of it when Rocky drives his car while thinking about the past, and what we see is a clip show from past movies. Great way to fill 5 minutes. The movie has a great soundtrack. The montages are fun, but it is totally contrived and ridiculous. No argument with me there. Rocky V, on the other hand, deals with the dark side of boxing. After 4 movies where Rocky wins all the time, now he didn't win all the time. He didn't win in the first movie. Now he has to deal with brain damage, losing all his money due to bad business deals and overspending crooked promoters. His son feels neglected, and finally a protege turns on him. This does happen in real life. The boxing business, like any other business, can be dirty. And if you don't watch yourself, you can lose everything. So how does Rocky deal with this new reality after being successful for so long? This is intriguing. Of course, you have to believe that sometime during Rocky IV, Paulie got Rocky to blindly sign power of attorney, giving his accountant power on his money. I didn't see that in Rocky IV, did you? I must have been out getting popcorn. Obviously, also, it does not help the movie that Rocky street fights at the end instead of having a boxing match. But Rocky V does have story development and has drama. It is not just a bunch of music videos stuck together like Rocky IV is. Rocky V is a better movie. Yet, like most people, I do like Rocky IV much better. Because I just don't like what happens in Rocky V. Nobody wants to see Rocky lose all his money and go back to the old neighborhood. That's depressing, no matter how realistic it is. You can like bad movies. It is okay. I remember one class in film school where, after destroying a movie to death, the very last question somebody came up with was, "Did you enjoy the movie?" And most people said they did. The quality of a movie has nothing to do with your enjoyment of it. What do you think? What does everybody think? That is what's great about this forum you've created and the decorum that you insist people have here. We can have an open, respectful discussion about the art we love. It reminds me of film school. Dude, Luke, that's like the biggest compliment ever. Thank you so much, sir. It is refreshing when I think of other forums I've attempted to take part in, but stopped because the insults that start flying around when somebody mentioned they like the Star Wars prequels. So keep up the good work, Rob. Luke Beckett. Well, Luke, this is a great letter, and this is a great topic. And I think entertainment, when it comes to what I would think to be, media, but whether it's comics, whether it's novels, whether it's movies, whether it's television, I think there's a spectrum of things that can be enjoyed. And when it comes to films, I have very snobby, what I would like to think are erudite tastes in movies for the most part. When I give you my list of my favorite filmmakers or my favorite films, I think most of you would say, yep, those are all the great movies of the world. However, I also have a love of low budget B movies, but even my taste in low budget B movies, I would say is good. But here's the thing, like, I can watch a really low budget movie. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. The other day, I showed Elizabeth Corvette Summer, and it's a film from the late 70s. It's not a large budget movie, and it's kind of goofy. Mark Hamill and Annie Potts made it. They star in it. It's about a kid. Mark Hamill plays a high school kid who designs the ultimate Corvette, and it gets stolen, and he has to go to Las Vegas and find it. But it's pretty. Watching it now, it's pretty good. Like, the movie's pretty good, even though it's low budget. It's pretty good. So as far as movies are concerned, there's a huge gamut of films. Like, the movies that I can't stand, and to my friend Anthony Ferrante, I say, I apologize for this. I can't watch movies like Sharknado. I can't. I find no enjoyment in them at all, even as dumb movies. I have to find something. Now, Anthony Ferrante made the movie he was supposed to make, and clearly the Sharknado movies caught on with a lot of people. Now you've got Zombie Tsunami. Is that what it's called? Zombie Tidal Wave, Zombie Tsunami. And if it's not called Zombie Tsunami, I don't know why. They called it Zombie Tidal Wave. He's doing that now. But, there's a lot of movies. I love Star Crash. Star Crash is this bargain basement Star Wars knockoff made in Italy in 1978. It's not good. It's not a good movie. I dearly love it. I love the ingenuity that it shows. I don't care if I can recognize the model kits that the spaceships were kit bashed from. Joe Spinell plays Count Zarth Arn. Joe Spinell, I mean, the movie, the acting is not good. The special effects are not good, but there's homages. There's such verve and delight and love that the movie was made with. It's just so gonzo in what it was trying to do. I mean, it's like, hey, let's rip off from Ray Harryhausen, or hey, let's rip off from William Cameron Menzies and the original Invaders from Mars. I mean, I watched the movie and I find it delightful. Would I ever ask anybody to watch the film? No, but I love it. I love Star Crash. When it came out on Blu-ray, I bought it the first day it was out. I had that shit pre-ordered on Amazon, son. Showed up at my house. I watched it. It looks great on Blu-ray. I love Star Crash. There's an action film. I talked about it the other day. Stone Cold, that stars Brian Bosworth, a former college football star who the Seahawks recruited, and he played one season. It didn't work out, and I think he got injured and left football for good. And he tried his hand at movies. I mean, give me a break. If you watch Stone Cold, but it was directed by Craig Baxley, who's a stuntman, and Lance Henriksen plays the leader of this evil motorcycle gang. This movie rules. I love Stone Cold. Now, if you're going to watch it and go, Brian Bosworth's performance is terrible, I don't care. I don't care. As a B action thriller or as a C grade action thriller, this is top drawer B movie delightfulness. That's what it is. Stone Cold. It's on DVD, or it's on Blu-ray. You can get it. Lance Henriksen's performance makes it wildly entertaining. I think what's really interesting about Rocky V is Rocky V, for whatever reason, does not have verisimilitude. I don't believe a frame of it. I don't believe the way it was lit. I don't believe the shot choices. I don't believe Sage Stallone, rest in peace, Stallone's actual son playing his son. There's nothing about Rocky V I believe. Even though Rocky IV is a montage, for whatever reason, following up Rocky III, I believe it. Everything you said, Luke, about Rocky IV is absolutely correct. It's one montage after the other, totally ridiculous, but there's something about it. It knows what it is. It has the conviction of its beliefs, and it goes for it. And when you get to the end of Rocky IV, and if I can change, you can change, we all can change. I mean, come on. But Rocky V, I think the reason people don't like Rocky V is, I believe, no one believes in it. Like you said, all the elements that are there should have made it a better movie. I don't believe it. I don't believe a frame of Rocky V. Whereas Rocky Balboa is really good, and as everyone knows, I adore Creed. Creed is the way to reinvigorate a franchise. But I think that you can't begrudge, you can't expect. It's just like, I read a lot of. I dated this girl, Mary Forrest, and she would always give me a hard time about how many novels I read. And not only, I didn't read the best novels. I mean, I have classics. I've read a lot of the classics, but I read a lot of horror and science fiction novels and a lot of airport reading. When something like the Da Vinci Code became big, I'm like, I got to read that, see what it's all about. And as I would agree with the person who said the Da Vinci Code is the greatest bad novel you'll ever love. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I certainly enjoyed reading it. I read a lot of what would be considered, I'd like to say I read the very best horror novels and the very best science fiction novels, but people are like, why aren't you reading more of the classics? And to me, like, even when you're reading a science fiction or horror novel, even if I'm reading Graham Masterton's sequel to The Manitou, The Revenge of the Manitou, or Burial, or Manitou Blood, or whatever, if I'm reading any, you could be reading, if you're going to, write a novel about reincarnated Indian medicine men, I'm telling you, you're not going to go wrong if you read The Manitou and Revenge of the Manitou by Graham Masterton. You're just not going to. Am I going to convince many people, especially a lot of friends I have, that they should be picking up Graham Masterton's novels, whether it's The Manitou, whether it's The Jinn, whether it's Tengu? Tengu's great. It's about a Japanese demon who wants to take revenge for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they blow up the Santa Onofre nuclear power plant at the end, right down the road, which would pass by to go to San Diego every Comic-Con. Every Comic-Con, I always think about Tengu, Graham Masterton's Tengu. I'm like, you know what? In that book, they succeeded in blowing it up, which I kind of liked. But I read a lot of stuff that you can't say is great. And I think there's a lot of movies. There's a lot of movies that are comfort food, that you can love movies that. The funny thing about it is, are they bad? You see, in my mind, like Ed Wood movies, they're obviously demonstrably bad. I don't think Michael Bay's movies are bad. Like, I love Armageddon because it's about space. Is Armageddon a great movie? Does it make me think? No, I don't think it's a great movie, but it's like going to Wendy's and getting a bacon stacker. You can get 5 meat patties and bacon and cheese, and that's it. And that's what Armageddon's like. It's like, I don't want to eat a bacon stacker every day, but it's kind of once, after skiing or something, you've worked up an appetite, and there happens to be a Wendy's on the way down the mountain. It's like, ooh, let's stop there. I'll get a bacon stacker. I think it's okay to like bad movies. It's what's important, whether they're good or they're bad, it's important that you like them. At the end of the day, nothing matters. If you like something, like it with fierce conviction. Don't worry about what anybody else says, because if you like it, I love Star Crash. People are going to say that movie's trash. Indeed, it might very well be. I find things to love about Star Crash. Luigi Cozzi's, I love it so much. I love the John Barry score. I love the fact Christopher Plummer's in it for like 5 minutes. I love the fact Marjo Gortner's in it. It's David Hasselhoff's in it, and I especially like Caroline Munro. It's not a great movie, and nor would I put it on any list of fine films. And I hated that Mystery Science Theater 3000 did an episode, one of their new Netflix episodes about Star Crash. I was going to protest, but I didn't. I understand. So I think all that matters is if you like something, like it with fierce conviction. Never apologize to anybody else. And if you want to discuss those movies that you like, watch Stone Cold, watch Star Crash. Stone Cold is a lot more palatable than Star Crash, to be honest. But I think Stone Cold is legitimately a great B film. And Stubble McShave says, verisimilitude, word in drinking game, no sip yet. Did I? Come on, you had to have said it. Or I said verisimilitude, didn't I? Anyway, let's see. Alexander Wilson says, Casey Bloys said the merger affected HBO's budget. They couldn't raise it, and they wanted Glow and Dear White People, but the merger didn't allow it. That could be. I could have seen Glow and Dear White People being HBO shows, but the merger, yeah, it's too bad. And you know what? You know what's really sad about what happened at HBO? You've got all these people who came over from AT&T that fancy themselves movie. This is what happens. They get rid of, or the people either are pushed out or they're let go. The people that made HBO what it is now are pretty much all gone. And now you've got all these AT&T execs that are blinded by the entertainment business. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with HBO and HBO Max and what they're going to make. We shall see. Anthony Gonzalez says, any chance you could ever get McWeeny on the show? He has a wealth of knowledge and would be a great guest. Well, Anthony, as you know, I managed Drew McWeeny's career in the movie Trivia Schmodown. He's part of my faction, The Family, so I do know him. I'd love to have him come on the show. He is great. As a matter of fact, I'd love to talk to him about good movies versus bad movies. I think it'd be good. And Mark C writes in and says he was referring to the new TV show. Good, because Mark, you and I frequently park our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay, which is always a good thing. But yeah, that's good. I'm glad that you're referring to the TV show. So anyway, what Luke had to say, really interesting letter. I really liked hearing about that. Here's another one, Brian Eng. I love these letters. These letters that were great. By the way, all of these letters I'm reading are on the Burnettwork.net website. So you can go there and reread them and comment, because anybody who writes in, I'm sure would love to hear from you guys. The Burnettwork website, you can also support the channel at the Burnettwork website, support what we're doing. And, Mike Bodden does a really good job with the website, and it's expanding exponentially. I really love the fact that the website's becoming a destination spot where people are sharing things and participating. That doesn't mean I don't want you to comment on these chats, because I do. And as a matter of fact, if you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe, hit that little bell. It helps the YouTube analytics. This is a really interesting movie. Quick letter, but an interesting letter. This comes from Brian Eng. Brian Eng, longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, always has something interesting to say. Brian Eng writes in, Rob, just read the Wikipedia page for blaxploitation. And if you go to the website, there will be a link that will open to the new page. And I don't know what to think of it. On one hand, it sounded very popular and entertaining. On the other hand, the NAACP hated it and brought about its demise. So in general, was it good or bad? What Brian Eng is asking about, and I would get taken to task when I use the term blaxploitation to define these movies. Now, in the early 70s, really mostly in the early 70s, there was a genre of movies called, well, they were known as blaxploitation films. They weren't always made necessarily by black people, but they primarily had black protagonists, both male and female. You had, of course, Richard Roundtree in Shaft. You had like Fred Williamson in Slaughter. You had Rudy Ray Moore in Dolomite, and the Disco Godfather, and the Human Tornado. There was actually a Dolomite trilogy. But these were films that were directed at urban audiences, drive-in theaters, that kind of thing, that showed virile black men that were either criminals themselves or they were taking down criminals, or most of the time they dealt with the criminal underworld on the seedy streets of New York, and they were frequently shot in New York. But sometimes, like Slaughter Goes to Africa was not shot in New York, but then you had Pam Grier, there was Coffee and Foxy Brown, and basically it was African American black actors, and there was also a lot of white actors in them. You had Larry Cohen, one of the great Jewish filmmakers. Larry Cohen made Black Caesar, and the blaxploitation genre was a favorite genre of audiences in the early to mid 70s, and they combined action, cop, thriller, martial arts, a lot of sex, a lot of violence, a lot of drug use, and they glorified not the greatest behavior in the world, which is why the NAACP were not fans of these films. I think these films, again, they run the gamut. Some of them are tremendous. Some of them are terrible. A lot of them are terrible. Not because of the subject matter or the stars, but because the filmmaking wasn't so great. I grew up watching blaxploitation movies. I love them. I loved characters like Slaughter, and I loved characters like Shaft. And as I've talked about, when Larry Cohen, who made Black Caesar, which was one of the first of these movies, or one of my favorites, there's a couple, Putney Swope and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. Those are legit. They're not necessarily blaxploitation movies, although Putney Swope. If you haven't seen Putney Swope, as a matter of fact, hang on, do I have it here? Oh, I do. Okay, if you've never seen Putney Swope, Vinegar Syndrome put this out. We made a joke about Criterion putting Putney Swope out in Free Enterprise. If you haven't seen Putney Swope, you got to see this. Just go look at the trailer for Putney Swope on YouTube. Thank God Vinegar Syndrome put Putney Swope out. I love Vinegar Syndrome. Anyway, you got to check Putney Swope out. But there's a lot of they're totally politically incorrect. If you watch them now, you can't even, I would imagine by even saying the word blaxploitation, I would offend somebody. But, when you say that, it is a genre. I even studied that in college. So I'm a big blaxploitation film fan. They're a lot of fun. Blaxploitation movies are a lot of fun, probably because they can get so politically incorrect. But, I mean, they brought the world Fred Williamson and Richard Roundtree, and Rudy Ray Moore, and it's like the world is a better place with these men and their films. And one of my favorite movie going experiences ever was when Larry Cohen, who made Black Caesar, he made the movie Original Gangsters in the 90s, and he brought back all of these stars. He brought back Fred Williamson. By the way, Fred Williamson's introduction in Original Gangsters is when he's standing in the doorway of this Learjet. It's great. But Original Gangsters, so I was so excited when this was coming out because he brought back all of the blaxploitation stars and put them in a movie, and they basically all had to come back together to this town. I think it was Detroit, and like kick ass and take out the younger drug dealing gangs that had their Uzis and everything. So I go to it opened at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, which is one of my favorite theaters. There was like 5 people in the theater. because there was only 5 of us that really wanted. I went the opening show. I was by myself, and everybody in the theater, we were hooting. The movie's only okay. It's not great. We were hooting and hollering. We loved it so much because it knew what it was. It was so much fun to watch. It's not one of the greatest movies in the world, but it's kind of like the Generations or the Infinity War of blaxploitation movies. But check it out. Was blaxploitation good or bad? Well, I think anything that supports stereotypical behavior might not be such a good thing. But it was really interesting. I think that there was an entire genre. I would consider a lot of blaxploitation movies would also be part of the vigilante films of the 70s. And just because blaxploitation movies were new, that's why they were you didn't have films populated with black actors like these kinds of movies. It was new. It was a new thing. So they were popular with a lot of audiences, multi-ethnic audiences. But there was also an element, certainly Shaft, that was part of that, Shaft and Dirty Harry. You could say that they were all part of this urban vigilante, cops overstepping their bounds. And there was a lot going on. I mean, the crime-ridden streets of New York was something that was constantly seen. It also came out of the Vietnam era. And we were seeing body bags on the nightly news. And I am not as well versed on the blaxploitation genre as I probably should be, but I do like a number of the films. And I will not deny that I did enjoy, I'd never seen Dolomite, or I'd never seen The Human Tornado or Disco Godfather. But when I was able to get them when they first came out on videotape, I adored them. I showed them to everybody I knew. I'm like, look at this. And yes, I was kind of looking at them as a curiosity. I didn't think they were great movies. I certainly thought they were fun. But are they politically correct? No. Are they probably the best? Is it the black community putting their best foot forward? Certainly not. But none of those movies in the 70s were. I mean, the rape revenge fantasy films, there were so many movies that right now the people would not look kindly upon. Whether it was, you watch Thriller, the original Swedish version of Thriller, A Cruel Picture. I've talked about that before, but you talk about what went on with, Death Wish or Dirty Harry or Shaft or Slaughter or any of these films. There was something going on, and the American culture was very different than it is today. And a lot of it really had to do with the tumult of the 60s and what was happening. And we were post-Vietnam, post the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement, and mostly New York City, which is the epicenter of America, really, if you think about it. I mean, New York City was frankly a shithole back then. And, even big budget movies like Serpico, it was all kind of the same. There was something going on. A lot of these movies were New York set, some were also in LA, obviously, because it was easier to make movies here. But there's a lot in. See, now I want to go delve in. I want to go delve in and start reading up on blaxploitation films. But yeah, was it good or bad? Brian's question, ultimately, was it good or bad? You know what? I think ultimately it was probably good. I think people got careers out of them. Certainly, Pam Grier started her career. We did see black actors on the big screen across America. Perhaps their portrayal was maybe not the best, but the fact that you had black actors now being known for the mainstream, and of course, Shaft, Isaac Hayes, the music that these brought forth. I mean, look, we can always look back on our past and go, that was pretty shitty. And a lot of the time, indeed, it was. But I, as a middle-aged Jewish white dude, I don't know if I'm the person to comment on blaxploitation, but Larry Cohen, at the time, I don't think he was middle-aged, but he was a young Jewish dude in New York. He made Black Caesar, and I think the world is a better place because he made it. So, but that's a really good question. What do you guys think? I don't know. Pretty interesting. I don't know. Here's another interesting letter. Total change of pace, but a good letter. This comes from Jim Boyette. I think it's Jim, right? or Jay Boyette. I think it's Jim, but if not Jim, then Jay Boyette. Jay Boyette writes and says, "Dear Rob, in a recent Robservations, I think it was 191, you read a viewer's letter talking about his experience publishing via Amazon and CreateSpace, and asked whether anyone else in the Post-Geek Singularity had done so. And since I have, I thought, hey, that sounds like an explicit invitation to discuss my work. Yes." Or as they said in Exorcist 3, as Brad Dourif said, "Oh, that is a clear invitation to the dance." If you want to read this letter publicly, that's awesome, but I will understand if you choose not to, since it might be seen as plugging my work or as me trying to hijack your show as a platform to plug it or something like that. Well, I say to you, Jay, so what? Plug away. This show is supposed to be a place where we can not only talk about these things, but share our own work. I mean, if there's nothing I want to do more than I want to inspire people to share their own work and make cool stuff, because I want more new things to read before one foot in the grave turns to be my entire body in the grave. I hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, I had it in the back of my mind to share my work with you anyway, and your on-air question just tipped the scales. I'm taking the liberty of sending you 2 paperbacks via the contact address on the website, Daughter of the Damned and Ironheart. Also, here's a link to a short film of mine, The Closet, which I'm also sending along for shits and giggles. By the way, this letter is again on the Burnettwork website, so you can go watch The Closet. By the end of this summer, I should have 12 books out. I have 3 slated for this summer. All of those will be published through Amazon, except for my play Poisoned, which is published through a micro press called Next Stage Press. My first novel, Brothel, came out from a micro press in 2012, but I've since republished it through Amazon via my own company, Saltimbank Books. I started publishing via Amazon with my second novel in 2014. It appeals to the control freak in me. Besides, as a freelancer in publishing, I'm disenchanted with the state of today's mainstream publishing. The second hardest thing about self-publishing, or indie publishing, as people on the scene prefer to brand it, is that you have to sell your own books. On the other hand, things are tough all over. I have plenty of friends who are traditionally published authors, and none of them pay rent solely off their book sales. And I don't need to sell as many books as a traditionally published author. For instance, at Amazon's current rate, for each ebook I sell at $3.99, I receive $2.76. You do? That's great. Amazon slices $1.23. A traditionally published author gets less money per book in royalties, and the books are harder to sell because they cost twice as much. Thanks to all of the overhead that comes with normal publishing, with a normal publishing company. The first hardest thing about self-publishing is the weird pressure within the indie publishing community to stifle creativity. At least that's the way it feels to me. If you go into indie publishing chat rooms or listen to indie publishing podcasts, so much of the focus is on your author brand. The ideal that everyone recommends is to write a nice long series of 10 or 20 books, because once you can get a reader to commit to a series, you can make lots of sales to him or her. If you've read the first 3 books in a series, you're more likely to buy the 4th book, even if it's mediocre, than you are to buy a great standalone book. Or, if you don't want to write a series, you're supposed to at least write for a very specific niche. You should sit down and work out your brand identity first, they say, and then write books to fit it. You should choose the genre you want to write in, then go into Amazon and research which books in that genre are selling well, and tailor both your book and your marketing copy so that the Amazon algorithms will recommend your book to people who bought other popular books in that genre. I find all of that depressing. In 2014, when I started publishing through Amazon, I was like, oh shit, here's the space where I can do whatever I want. Then I got into the space and found it was full of people talking about all the rules you have to follow, rules that could wind up making you a lot of money. And of course you listen, because a lot of people talking about those rules are indeed making shit tons of money by following them. And I, Rob, would like to make money. Yes, I would. I have an almost 3-year-old, and in the years since my wife got pregnant, I've suffered periodic creative crises where I basically get so freaked out about how I should write responsibly, meaning in such a manner as to bring in some dough for the family, that I can't write anything at all, or else write garbage. Well, your 3-year-old might grow up to love hot toys, in which case you're in real trouble, but that's an aside. I have to periodically remind myself that I always wanted to be a writer who just wrote every damn thing. My first book, Brothel, is a dark comedy about college students in Arkansas who start a DIY, do-it-yourself brothel, and the catastrophic hijinks that ensue. That's very risky business. My novel, The Unkillables, is about cavemen fighting zombies that have been inadvertently brought back through time from 30,000 years in the future by technologically advanced humans trying to escape their own zombie apocalypse. Oh, dude, I would read that shit. As a matter of fact, let's make that movie. Ironheart is a space opera in which the antagonist is a seemingly immortal woman who's been alive for tens of thousands of years. I've always been interested in immortal creatures or creatures with hyper-extended lifespans. Vampires' brains aren't structurally different from ours as far as I know. A millennia's worth of memories would have to become distorted and confused. That's kind of an interesting idea. I also wrote The Little Mermaid, a horror story, a modern-day horror retelling of the fairy tale set on Long Island. Originally, I planned to make it a low-budget horror screenplay, but wound up writing it as a book. I wanted it to feel like H.P. Lovecraft and Kathy Koja had decided to write a B-movie together. I love my Kathy Koja. Nicely done. Anyway, just wanted to share with you regarding my career, such as it is. After having had so much fun learning about yours, lately over drinks, I've been performing my impression of Shatner's musical number at the end of Free Enterprise and getting some amazed looks. A final note. I've recently had a weird sort of success with that film, The Closet. We shot it in one day in my apartment. Casting friends, my wife is the one in the pigtails. The entirety of my budget was literally the cost of 2 pizzas and the 3 actors and the one-man crew. For almost 5 years, the movie just sat on Vimeo and YouTube, and suddenly in the last couple of months, it's got 425,000 views. And from my analytics, I know about 15% of those views went all the way to the end of the video, which I call a win. But why? I didn't do anything to promote it. I guess someone somewhere, for some reason, put it on a list. But I found no trace of that from Googling around. But isn't that great? 425,000? My God, I'm lucky if I get 2,000 people to watch these chats. I keep hoping that it'll translate into book sales, but no joy. I guess when people watch a 12-minute crime drama on YouTube, they don't say to themselves, hey, I wonder if this writer-director also wrote a novel about time-traveling zombies. You know what, though? They should, shouldn't they? Because you did. I mean, I would, but that's different. But it's nice to think that it's out there being shared with people. Anyway, whether you read this on your chat or not, thanks for indulging me, and thanks also for the show. It's a lot of fun. Best, Jay Boyette. Well, first of all, Jay Boyette, good on you, sir, for going out there and doing something. I mean, I think one of the great things about this modern age is that we can share these things. You know, I went on the end of Midnight's Edge. There's a gentleman on there that always sends me links to their chats if I have time to jump on. And I got to jump on to this chat, and Gary Beekler from Nerdrotic was on there. And I watch Gary Beekler all the time, and I know what it's like. It's like when you watch people on YouTube, you feel like you know them. Like I watch Gary Beekler because he doesn't drink, but I feel like I'm at a bar with him, you know, hanging out and talking the way we would talk. And I understand the whole appeal of YouTube and these long form chat things is that you develop a relationship, at least in your own mind, with the people that you watch. And so when I go on, people are like, why do you go on to Midnight's Edge or whatever? Well, I like everybody there. You know, I like everybody on. I met some good people there that I hadn't met before from the Popcast and things like that. And I think it's fun, you know. And when you're out there and you've written books or you've made your movie like The Closet, isn't it strange? I mean, think about it. If 425,000 people have watched your movie, how many indie films today that are released in theaters with marketing budgets get 425,000 people to watch? How many? I mean, that's a lot of people. And that's the great thing about YouTube. And that's what YouTube has brought to this space, is that we can all talk and we can all chat. And also Amazon, you know, don't even worry. Everybody's trying to tell you, like, I get it. You know, making money is great. I want to make money. I mean, I do YouTube to augment my income, you know, to help me in a way. I wish I had done it before, but one of the great things about being on YouTube is it just shores up the fact that it gives me. I just started working on my friend Frank. He has traveled around the world shooting documentary material. He's a big skier. He went to Afghanistan and shot a ski documentary that he's calling, just in his own mind, Ski Hod. But he hasn't done anything with the footage. Well, he went to Sierra Leone into the Ebola zone a number of years ago and interviewed a lot of the doctors that were looking for the where did Ebola and hemorrhagic fever, Marburg, and where did it come from? And I've been after him and we've been talking about it, and he finally sent me the footage, and it's beautifully shot footage. And I want to make a feature documentary out of it. Now, he gave me a little bit of money to start doing it, but I want to cut it together and make a feature-length documentary that I think it's important. I think I'm obsessed with anything to do with diseases and vectoring and hemorrhagic fever. I mean, Ebola, it's like the king of horror film diseases, the liquefaction of organs and everything. So, but Frank he just got on a plane and went and shot this stuff. Just thought it up and did it. Kind of like Walter Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, just thought it up and did it. I'm not saying you should travel up the Nung River and start your own, fiefdom and make people worship you as a god. Don't do that. But if you're going to make movies and write books, we now live in a world where you're no longer beholden to people that tell you can't do it. Look at Andy Weir. Andy Weir self-published The Martian, and it was picked up and it was put out and eventually became an incredible movie. And that's the world that we live in now. If you are motivated and you are creative and you want to use the tools at your disposal, look, I don't think anybody is creating because they necessarily only want to make money. You do because you create because you want to create. I mean, that's satisfaction in and of itself. I never thought that I would ever want to read a book about cavemen fighting time-traveling zombies until I just read your letter on this show. I'm going to go download that shit and read it. I mean, can I get a hard copy? Can I order the hard copy? Because I would want that. I would display that proudly on my bookshelf. And I wouldn't have known about it now. Swag Props. Let me just give him another shout out for this. This prop replica of the nine gates. I mean, this book, I keep this because I pick it up and play with it all the time. I mean, I love this so much that there's a guy in Malaysia watching these shows who made a prop replica of the 9 gates of the kingdom of heaven, and I have a copy of it because he sent me one. How would I have known that? So to my mind, what the modern age has given us, while everyone is screaming and yelling and bitching and moaning at each other and talking about how much they hate The Last Jedi or what's wrong, I'm talking about how much I'm not looking forward to the Watchmen TV show, even though I'm going to watch every episode. There are people like yourself who are utilizing this technology to create. And a movie you shot in a day has 425,000 views. That's 425,000 people on the planet Earth. That's crazy. That's bigger than many small towns in America. I mean, if you want an audience to watch your movie, and you just never know when it goes viral. This is great stuff. This is what the Post-Geek Singularity is. That's what we're living in, and that's the kind of times we live in. And can you imagine if people started bitching and moaning and complaining and actually started creating stuff? How much? And what's great is, I got to tell you, even the videos where people bitch and moan and complain, I'm getting more and more impressed by the production quality, the editorial. I laugh, but this girl Shelby Church, this YouTuber that I have no business watching, she's like 24 now, but I came across her because she talked about how much money she would be making off a video that had 1 million views. That's how I found her. I didn't know who she was, but she does quite a good job. I mean, she's been doing videos for 10 years, but her filmmaking, her photography, really top-notch stuff. I kind of feel dirty watching her videos because I could be her dad. But anyway, I appreciate the effort that people are making, and it's getting more and more sophisticated. I mean, we're seeing an explosion of creativity on a global scale. So I think it's awesome. I want to thank you for writing in, Jay Boyette, because it's great to hear from you. And I'm going to go order, and I think everybody should go order. You can get lists of those books. Go look at Jay's letter on the website and order his stuff from Amazon. Report back. Let's have a reviewing party where we all review. All of you should buy one of his books, and we'll do a chat where one day we'll just review Jay Boyette's books if I get enough letters. I will do that. We'll do a whole chat but I call dibs on the time traveling caveman zombie book. I'm going to review that one. So review any other ones but that one. So I'm going to review that one. Oh, this is another good, a really good letter. But it kind of makes me sad. Hi, Rob. This one comes actually from Bobby Kessler. Bobby Kessler writes in, "Hi, Rob. I became familiar with you and your work from watching the John Campea show. I'm a big fan of your Robservations live streams and especially Rip with Rob. I went to the Masters of the Web panel at San Diego Comic-Con this year, but I was too nervous to go up and talk to you. Bobby, never be too nervous. The reason we go to conventions is to talk to people. Always come up to me. If you see me on the street, talk to me. That's why I'm there. But anyway, I have a story that I've meaning to get off my chest, and I followed this story up with a question. I am currently a junior studying cinematic arts at the University of Iowa. Editor's note, go Hawks. That's Mike Bodden chiming in there. My passion is to become a filmmaker, whether that's through editing, capturing cinematography, directing, or all of the above if I get very lucky. Because of this, I've been searching for internships for this past summer. I managed to pick up a 2-week internship at a local TV station where I edited 2 of my own commercials that aired on TV, which is pretty cool. That's beyond pretty cool. That's very cool. However, amid the 50 or so applications I sent out, I only got one other one. Without giving names, an Iowan film director was shooting a film in Iowa, and he was looking for a production assistant. One of my friend's parents said that this job would have me as the bitch boy. But come on, working on an actual movie set sounds awesome to me. By the way, I wasn't called a bitch boy, but my first job, as I've often said, was actually on the Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I was the art department production assistant, and I was everybody's bitch boy, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So I sent my application, and shockingly, I got a response. They said they were extremely interested in having me work on the film, which brought me and my family endless excitement and joy. I then began a long process of getting this approved by my university to earn credit for this experience. Everything seemed to be organized as there was a professional-looking website and credible people working on the film. However, the first red flag came up when I Googled the main director of the feature. The first article popping up was the director himself getting busted for selling drugs. Not a good look at all, and this scared my parents since they are largely against drugs. I love that, largely. For me, I think all people make mistakes and can change. This happened about 8 years ago, and part of me believed that this was a thing of the past, but maybe this was just me in denial since I really wanted this job. Now we get to this past week. I finally got the internship approved for credit, so I emailed the director and told him I'd be ready to start working on August 9th. He sounded very excited in his reply, and he said he'd see me on the 9th and told me that he'd give me more information on the movie, a schedule, other info within the next few days. I thought nothing of this. On the 8th, I moved into my apartment in Iowa City, excited for my new internship, but also slightly alarmed. I still hadn't received any information from this director. I thought that maybe he was just a bit disorganized and that he'd get back to me. You probably see where this is going now. So I wake up on the 9th around 7 a.m., ready to go to work. I check my email, still no response. I sent him another email reaffirming I'm able to start on the 9th, wait all day, 12, 3, 9 p.m., nothing. Today is the 10th, and as I'm writing this, I still have not received a response. I'm afraid I've been bamboozled. What I'm not understanding is his motivation behind this. I didn't pay him in any way, so I'm not sure how he gained anything from screwing me over. Maybe the film didn't reach its goal budget. Maybe he's just behind schedule. I have no clue. I'm insanely frustrated because this would have not only been a great opportunity and a great job for my resume, but a really interesting experience. I guess this internship was too good to be true. So here comes my question. I listened to your story working on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which was really interesting and eye-opening. As someone who has found success in the film industry, what advice would you give to people who desire to work in this field? Thank you for reading this, Rob. I really admire your words of wisdom. Also, if you ever wish to bring Free Enterprise on tour, as you said you might in one of your Robservations episodes, the local nonprofit independent theater in Iowa City film scene would be more than happy to have you. Take care. # Justice for Han. Bobby K. Bobby, this is a great letter. And unfortunately, this is not something that is unique. This kind of thing happens all the time. And first of all, let me just start out by giving the benefit of the doubt to this director. I don't know him. I don't know anything about the film project. He might have had all the best intentions. Everything might have been happening, and it might have been moving along and all of those things. And he probably absolutely wanted to hire you and thought, okay, you're hired. I don't know whether his production was real, if he had his funding, whatever. But I will say this. If a director is contacting you directly and that is your only connection to a film that you're going to begin interning on, this is a huge red flag. Directors who are prepping films that are supposed to be happening in the next couple weeks do not have time to be talking to interns. What they have, or what they supposedly should have, is a production office, even small productions. There's people, other people are working on movies, not just him. If he's really a real filmmaker and there are things really happening, then there is a production office that you should have been referred to. Whether it's the production manager, the assistant production manager, somebody will be working on the film, and there'll be somebody that you can talk to. And if it's a real internship, you will get paperwork. You'll probably be asked to come in and meet somebody beforehand, because you're not going to be working directly for the director, probably. He wasn't hiring you to be his assistant, I don't think. You didn't say that in your letter. In which case you'd be working for production. You'd probably be a PA. Now, maybe they got pushed for some reason. Maybe he's in the thick of it. I too have been involved in projects. I have also, unfortunately, not always been the best at communicating with people when I should have, when I owed them money, or when I have work that is going to be late, or things like that. For whatever reason, it's not something I'm proud of, and nor do I advocate it. The one thing that you want to do, I cannot stress this enough. You must be communicative with people, always, no matter what. They need to be able to contact you by phone, by email. Now, a lot of people, if you're working on a project, that's the case. People feel in LA that spills over to every part of your life, that why aren't you picking up the phone? People just expect to be able to get you on the phone every moment of every single day. Like, there are times, like right now, I'll be talking for 2.5 hours. If somebody's calling me and wants me, I'm like, sorry, I didn't pick up. Why didn't you pick up, dude? Well, I'm doing something else, but if you're on the clock or you're on the payroll, always make yourself available, and always show up and do what you say you're going to do. But in this case, you were talking to the director. What you should have done is you should have asked the director if you could be referred to the production office or the production manager. But how are you supposed to know this? You're not supposed to know this. But that's what you would do, because you don't want to be a nuisance to the director. The director didn't say he was hiring you for his assistant. Now, in my mind, it's probably gone south, or maybe you'll hear from him today. I don't know. It was supposed to be the 9th. I mean, today is what, the 11th? So usually films don't start on the 9th, which is a Friday, unless they do. I mean, I'm not saying they can't, but depending on equipment rentals and things like that. But maybe you'll hear from them. I hope so, but I'd keep trying. Hopefully he's not going to ghost you. He's responded to you already. So I hope it goes better. But just always remember, you've got to talk to the production office, because usually a film has a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, and it's the production office that you should be looking for. And by the way, they might, if there is a production office, and if this film is legit, you can always check. Here's another thing that people don't check, but you can always look into the film. A lot of states have film offices, the film commission, the local film commission. You can check there, find out if the production has been listed, if they have any permits. And then you can find out where the production office is. You could call the film commission and say, you're looking for the number for whatever reason. You got to be sometimes creative, but the film commission might know, and they might be able to refer you to the production office, in which case you could call up and say, sometimes you gotta have some gumption and some wherewithal and make that call, and call the production office and say, hey, I was talking to the director. He said that there's an internship or a PA position, and that we were supposed to start the 9th, but I haven't heard from him, so I'm calling you. But I hope it all works out for you, because that would be a great thing to do. But if it doesn't, don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. Keep trying. And by the way, call the film commission anyway. Call the Iowa Film Commission and say, hey, there must be an Iowa Film Commission. Call them up and find out if you can get a list of any productions that are going to be coming into the state, and see if you can get numbers. Don't ask for the director or the producer. See if you can find the number to the production office. That's what you want to do. You want to call the production office, and you want to talk to the production manager. A lot of people call up, they want to talk to the director, the producer. But if you call the production office and you want to talk to the production manager or the assistant production manager, that's always a good way to start. And by the way, cold calls like that, I don't know how it is now, but if you're going to call the production office, which is always a good way to start, and then call the production manager or the assistant production manager, I've heard people get jobs that way. So, yeah, but don't give up. I hope it works out. Report back. We need to know. Report back, Bobby. Report back. Man, these are good letters today. I really enjoy all of the letters that we're getting, and we've got more. We have more. Echo Base Network is here. Echo Base Network. Welcome back, Echo Base Network. How are you? Would love to see you, Doomcock, and Nerdrotic do a stream together. I loved seeing you on Midnight's Edge After Dark as well. All those guys are top notch. Well, I'm a big fan of Doomcock's. I would like to go into his lair in the center of the earth. I think that would be fun. I would like to develop my own character that I could do. I could be somebody who lives on another part of the world. I want to be a character in Doomcock's world. But I like Doomcock, and yeah, I would love to do a scare. I love talking to Gary. I'd love to talk to Gary more. It was a lot of fun being on a live stream with him. I had a lot of fun. So I will look into that Echo Base Network. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang still here. I love that you're still here, Willow. Are you interested in watching Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? The illustrations in the book freaked me out when I was a kid. For those of you who don't know, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, a Guillermo del Toro produced film, which is based on a YA novel. I guess it was a series of books. Opened this weekend, did pretty well, actually. I do want to see this. I don't know if I'm going to run out to the theater to see them. That might be something I'm going to catch up with later, but I do want to see it. I really do want to see it, but it looks good. The trailer was great. And by the way, the director of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark directed The Autopsy of Jane Doe. If you guys haven't seen The Autopsy of Jane Doe, that shit was dope. I cannot recommend that movie highly enough. It's basically a horror movie that is set in one room. It's so well done. I am a big supporter of that director and The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Watch it. A lot of fun. Timbula the Spider Monkey asks, thoughts on Andrei Zulawski's Possession. Okay. For those of you who don't know what Possession is, I've talked about it before. Possession is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Not for everyone. Certainly not for everyone. But Zulawski, it's probably, I'm mispronouncing his name. I always said Zulawski, but I'm sure somebody will correct me. Polish director. Possession is a movie that stars Sam Neill and Isabella Gianni, and let's just say it's about the breakup of a marriage. That's what it's. Don't watch the trailer, because if you watch the foreign trailer, it gives too much away. When that movie opened originally in America, it was heavily edited because it's very much a European art film. I love it. I actually have Mondo put out a beautiful version of it in like this velour box that I have. I have an insert for Possession. I'm a huge Possession fan. It's one of my favorite horror movies. Isabella Gianni's performance is amazing. If you haven't seen Possession, everybody should watch it. But it's not for everyone. People are going to watch it and go, Rob, what the hell was that? What did you have me watch? Well, what I had you watch was awesome. But it is and don't read anything about it, because there is I'm not going to say anything, but the less you know about Possession, the better off you are. But it's a difficult movie to watch, but it's also a very rewarding movie to watch, and I truly adore it. And Timbula, I love that you asked about it because it's great. Oh, I didn't even finish reading your super chat. Thoughts on Possession. Just picked it up on Blu-ray. I'd forgotten how much I liked it. My girlfriend was not a fan. I can only imagine. Yes, I would say Possession is an acquired taste. Yeah. That's all. It's very interesting. That is a movie. That is a very divisive movie. It is not the kind of movie, if your girlfriend is not open to that kind of thing, Something tells me Willow Yang might dig it. I think Willow Yang might dig Possession. That's just me, though, having never met Willow or talked to her. But I would say that Willow and Vesna would probably dig Possession, too, if she hasn't already seen it. As a matter of fact, I want to go to a watch party with, I will bring the disc, and I want to watch Possession with Willow and Vesna and 4 bottles of wine. Because, man, that could get interesting. Anyway, watch Possession. It's pretty good. It's really good. I really liked it. I'm sorry. I'd love to hear from your girlfriend. Like, write me back and tell me what your girlfriend, if your girlfriend could describe the movie in a few sentences, what would she have thought? Because that cracks me up. Anthony Gonzalez says, a couple of years ago, Cameron released T2 in 3D in theaters, and it was incredible. He said he would do the same for Aliens. Has anyone heard anything about it? I have not. I was really disappointed in the T2 3D disc that was released, unfortunately, which, yeah, it kind of bums me out. But it was incredible, really well done. And if there's James Cameron is the master of 3D. I mean, look, Avatar is the greatest 3D movie ever made. The 3D is the best ever done, bar none. And it's amazing. And I can't wait to see Avatar 2. But yeah, I liked it in the theater, and I haven't heard anything about Aliens. I don't know if Aliens would work as well. I don't know. It might. It'd certainly be cool in 3D, like going around Hadley's Hope, the wreckage of Hadley's Hope when they're going through all those corridors. Man, that would be awesome in 3D. I'd love to see that. Cardinal Sidden says, are you excited to see Denis Villeneuve's version of Dune? Well, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Yes, I am so excited I know people are like, what the hell does that mean? I know. But if you read the book, you know what the Chome Company is. But Dune and Bond 25 are the movies of 2020 for me. I mean, yeah, I do want to see Black Widow, but Dune and Bond 25, those are the 2 movies I'm most excited about. I cannot wait to see Dune. I cannot wait. Because Denis Villeneuve, I believe when I watch his movies, he is a smart man, and he is thinking 3-dimensionally. And I think when I watch some of his movies, I feel like I'm getting something out of them. This is a very funny letter. This next letter comes from Jeffrey Mao again. Jeffrey Mao has been killing it with the letters. And this letter is very funny. Hi, Rob. I was sitting down to dinner this past Friday night. My 7-year-old son, Victor, asks me out of the blue, which he is wont to do, are Ewoks dumb? I had to think for a moment and ask him what he meant by dumb. He wanted to know why they waited until the rebels fell out of the net. I replied that it does seem kind of odd for them to wait to show themselves like that. That led a further discussion about some of the things that didn't make sense in Return of the Jedi, such as, why would the Ewoks have a human-sized dress for Leia? And why are humans able to stand up straight in their huts? Additionally, for whom was the trap set? The net was very large and able to hold 1 Wookiee, 2 humans, and 2 droids, altogether at least several hundred pounds, thousands of pounds. Did the Ewoks expect Leia's friends to come searching for her? If so, why did they bait the trap with meat that only an animal or instinct-driven creature like Chewbacca would fall for? If this was a regular hunting party, what were they hunting? The Ewok group was pretty large, so they must have been preparing for a serious fight if it wasn't the rebels they were expecting. Also, why would C-3PO have programming forbidding him to impersonate a deity? This led to think of all the other things in Jedi that don't make sense. I'm not even going to touch the whole Jabba Han rescue act. That's a whole other story. But I'll give you a few. To start off, we have Vader paying an unexpected visit to Death Star 2. Moff Jerjerrod is surprised and very apprehensive that Vader has come to supervise the construction, then made even more nervous that the Emperor is coming. Apparently, he is most displeased. When the Emperor does arrive, we don't see him attending to any matters concerning the progress of the construction. Later on, he boasts that the Death Star is fully armed and operational. Huh? When did this happen? What was the whole point of all the pressure placed on Jerjerrod? The distance between the point where the speeder bike chase starts and ends must be at least several tens of miles, given the apparent speed of the bikes and the time the chase elapsed. Realistically, it would take several hours, if not an entire Earth day, to hike that distance, given the very rough terrain. Yet, We see Luke make it back in not much time. I'll allow some Jedi skills in allowing him to navigate his way back. Then the rebel team also returned to the bike crash site in what appears to be a pretty fast time. I could imagine a well-trained ranger unit being able to hike that distance, but we also have two very slowing droids that also cover the distance, and it doesn't make much sense. Luke arrives late to the Alliance briefing on the attack on the Death Star 2, but in time to volunteer to join Han's crew. The meeting then immediately ends very abruptly. Luke has the power to just end a meeting like that? Huh. By the way, is Luke's X-Wing just left there on Home 1? No one else is going to use it? Seems like an awful waste. I could also produce quite a long list for Empire as well. It's generally assumed to be the best Star Wars film, but it is by no means unassailable. It can be picked apart pretty well. I don't pick on them to hate, more to just let others know not to be blinded by conventional thinking and to keep an open mind about the things they watch. It's not done out of any kind of hate, but in the hopes that creators will strive to make things more sensible and logical in their story and plot construction. We could easily have movies that are just as entertaining, if not more so, but have a lot fewer holes. Thanks for your time, and see you in the Singularity. Jeff. Great letter, Jeff. You know what? I don't think I need to say anything more. I've told people that Return of the Jedi remained the single greatest cinematic disappointment of my life, and that hasn't changed. Not since 1983. I don't know what to say. This next one comes from Koba. I love when Koba writes in. Hello again, Rob. Today, I would love to tell you about my love of Doctor Who. To me, Doctor Who is what Star Trek is to you. I grew up with the show, granted the revival, though I did go back and watch some classics a lot too. I own every single surviving episode on DVD, and I'm getting the new Blu-ray releases, and it pains me to know my collection may never be complete. Damn the Great Purge of 1967 and 1978. I also have a wide range of books and audio stories in my collection. I've had the pleasure of meeting the stars of the show, including a few of the doctors. Mr. Tom Baker, Peter Davidson, Colin Baker, and Sylvester McCoy, and a wide range of the companions. I must say my favorite doctor is Mr. Patrick Troughton. Again, damn the great purges at the BBC archives, though I love them all. Another great thing about Doctor Who is how it can mix different genres. Yes, it's a sci-fi show, but it can also be a historical epic, a political thriller, a gothic horror, or even a romance. I love the creativity behind the scenes. I mean, who else would make a sink plunger a tool of the evilest alien force to exist? And Doctor Who can be inspired by what came before it, with the works of H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and C.S. Lewis, who sadly died the day before the first episode of Doctor Who aired, same as President John F. Kennedy. Doctor Who also inspired what came after, from Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and yes, even Star Trek. The Borg versus the Cybermen. I love Doctor Who. Koba. Well, you know, Koba, I didn't know much about Doctor Who. It aired on PBS growing up, and I would watch it. I mean, I remember in Starlog always seeing Tom Baker. So Tom Baker was really the first Doctor Who that I saw. And then I went back and watched, I had seen the movies, the Peter Cushing movies, the Doctor Who movies. And then my friends Eric Wallace and John Colbrenner, we would watch Doctor Who together, and I saw the Sylvester McCoy and the Patrick Troughton versions. And I like you. Patrick Troughton's great. And Big Chief Studios, the action figure company out of the UK, are making Doctor Who figures. I have the Matt Smith figure, and I want to get all their 12-inch Doctor Who figures just to have them, because it'd be cool to have them all. But you know, I totally agree with you. The reboot, a lot of people got into it. I thought Christopher Eccleston was a great Doctor Who. I mean, I understand why he didn't want to do more than one season, but I think it's been really hit and miss. I mean, I really like the Russell T Davies versions of Doctor Who, and then after that I wasn't as into it, but I think Doctor Who's great. Again, the great thing about Doctor Who is it's basically an anthology series where you can do all kinds of different stories with continuing characters, the same way that Star Trek did, and same way like Space 1999 did. A lot of these great sci-fi shows where you can delve into many different genres. And I think, like you pointed out, that's one of the great things about Doctor Who. But again, Doctor Who really lives and dies by the Doctor and his relationships with his companions or the people that he's with. I think Doctor Who's great. I love the concept of it. I don't know nearly as much about it as I do Star Trek, but obviously it's been around. Like, I remember I was all caught up in the 50th anniversary celebrations. I think that was in 2013. So it was 1963 that Doctor Who debuted, I think, right? Was it 63? Yeah, because it would have been the 50th anniversary in 2013, and I was into it, man. And John Hurt is the War Doctor. I loved all that. But again, Doctor Who was something I came to later in life, but I totally feel you, and I think it's great, and I love that Doctor Who is continuing. And now we have a female Doctor Who. I think Jodie Whittaker is a great actress. I don't think necessarily that she's probably been as well served as she could have been by the storylines. I think Russell T Davies was clearly the great of all the modern Who showrunners. He was probably the best. I just again finished watching Years and Years on HBO. What an amazing show! So yeah, I'm a big Doctor Who fan. And I didn't know that Doctor Who debuted the day before, or the day after C.S. Lewis and died and Kennedy was shot. That's amazing. But yeah, I'd be curious. Maybe write in a primer for what do you think the 10 best episodes of Doctor Who to watch, or maybe what are your five favorite episodes for each Doctor? That'd be interesting. That's something we could post on the website and have people comment on. People would love that. Brian Eng is back. Brian Eng has another quick question that I think is interesting. Again, blaxploitation. This is interesting too. Hi, Rob. Do you think hip hop should be included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? The argument for its inclusion is that hip hop and punk rock were born from the revolution against disco, which is considered rock. Therefore, they are also considered rock. What do you think? You know what? I think so. I think that they should be, because the impulse of it's popular music, and arguably you could say that that hip hop is far more popular now than even rock music is today. I absolutely think that hip hop and punk and all of those things should be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I also think that hip hop should also have perhaps its own thing, because the history of hip hop, like the Netflix show The Get Down, I know it's not accurate, but hearing all about Kool Herc and the beginnings of hip hop was really interesting. And I think that hip hop was created at a specific time and place, and how it's become and moved into our culture is really interesting. And I do think it should absolutely be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 100%. But also, I would like to. I mean, you've got segregated awards like the BET Awards and things like that. But yes, I think hip hop is absolutely part of our pop culture music legacy, and it definitely should be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 100%. And by the way, I mean, again, I always talk about the Wu-Tang Clan or Eric B. and Rakim. I think that, and I was talking about Too Short the other day. Somebody wrote me that they were a Too Short fan. How can you not be a fan of Too Short? I probably wouldn't be playing Too Short loud out of my car these days, but I did love those records. And even I think about, I used to love LL Cool J, old LL Cool J. Brenda's got a big old butt, and I'm leaving you. See ya. Can't say that anymore. But that stuff was great. I loved all that. But yes, hip hop should absolutely be. To answer your question, yes, it should be. Hip hop is just as valid any form of pop music, and it's modern pop. It started really in the 70s and has grown and become vibrant, and I think it's a worldwide musical force, just like any other pop music is, and it's absolutely should be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, again, there's going to be people like, well, unless they play instruments, unless it's like Us 3 or something. No. I think it should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, yeah. What do you guys think? I don't know. That's an interesting question. It's funny. I love that you guys write in these kinds of things. I mean, I'm not qualified really to pontificate about hip hop, but I do think hip hop should absolutely be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Timula the Spider Monkey is here. Timula the Spider Monkey, at my request, and by the way, thanks for supporting the channel, writes back, I can tell you what she thought of Possession. Sick and exploitative were the words she used the most. Personally, I think she was just put off by how young Sam Neill looked. Yes, Sam Neill was definitely in Damien mode. I think that here, let's check this out. Let's see. Let's find out. I think Omen 2, 3, Omen 3, The Final Conflict. So Omen 3, The Final Conflict. I think I'm right about this. Omen 3, The Final Conflict came out in 1981. And so did Possession. I'm correct about that. Sam Neill had one heck of a good year in 1981. He played the devil himself. Well, I guess the son of the devil. Damien Thorne, the adult Damien Thorne, which to this day has one of my favorite deaths in any horror movie. When this, I think it's a senator, somebody calls a press conference, and the guy who's called the press conference, he's taken his typewriter ribbon, he's tied it on one end to a gun and the other end to the door, and when they open the door, the gun shoots and blows his head off. One of my favorite deaths in any movie. I know in our current climate, I shouldn't admit that, but it's true. Also, Omen 3 has an incredible score. Jerry Goldsmith's score, incredible score. So Sam Neill, yes, he was also in Omen 3 the same year as Possession came out. So what a 1-2 Sam Neill double bill. If you're a Sam Neill fan, and who isn't a Sam Neill fan, my God, watch Omen 3, watch The Final Conflict, Omen 3, and watch the uncut Possession, because what a double bill. And the fact that your girlfriend thinks Possession is sick and exploitative is music to my ears. I love your girlfriend. She was right there with you. It's just that she should enjoy things that are sick and exploitative, because it is a horror film. And I don't know, was it that sick and exploitative? But you guys got to watch Possession. Now you make me. I don't own the Omen movies on Blu-ray. They're putting out a new box set. I should probably get them. Actually, Omen 1, 2, and 3 are all pretty good. I mean, Omen 3, The Final Conflict, kind of ends a little, I guess it ended the only way it could, but it's a little anticlimactic, even though it's not really. I get it. I understand. I wanted it to be a bit better, though. There's a final letter here. One final letter of this epic. I'm here. I just want everyone to know that my moderator, Detective Jim, he came back from a funeral today of a good friend of his, and I've tried to make this show as wildly entertaining as possible for Jim. And I think we should all tell if Jim is still if he bailed from moderating. No, Jim's still here. Give Jim some love, and I hope that I've made this show, and Mike and I have endeavored to make this show a potpourri of interesting topics. And to end off, why shouldn't we talk about William Shatner? Because God knows I can never talk about William Shatner enough. So Ian Samuels, longtime contributor. A lot of these guys, you're flooding me with letters, but they're good. They're good letters. So why can I not read them? I can't not read them, so I'm going to read them. So Ian Samuels says, he writes in, Rob, I was considering doing a review of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I haven't seen it for some years now and thought it would be appropriate to rewatch the movie with older, more informed eyes. Well, I would say this, Ian Samuels, we're going to have a party here on Robservations on December 7th of this year. I'm going to do an epic live stream where I'm going to be on, I think, for like 8 hours. And all we're going to do for 8 hours, or maybe not 8 hours, as long as I can stand it. December 7th this year is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture. So I'm going to do like an all day, all we're going to do all day long is talk about Star Trek The Motion Picture. That's it. It's going to be an all Star Trek The Motion Picture chat. It's on December 7th, whatever day that is. I know a lot of people think it's a day that will live in infamy. I get it. It's Pearl Harbor Day, but it's also the 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture. So save it up for then, and let's chat. Let's do a chat. It's Star Trek The Motion Picture, December 7th this year on Robservations, assuming, nothing calamitous happens to me and I'm still around. December 7th, it's a date, people. Star Trek The Motion Picture all day, every day. Anyway, I was considering doing a review of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I haven't seen it for some years now and thought it would be appropriate to rewatch the movie with older, more informed eyes. So I opened up Netflix, where all the TV series from the original series through Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, and unfortunately Discovery, but also the movies, or at least that was the way it was. Now the movies are gone and I cannot watch the movies on Netflix. So the rewatch and review of the motion picture will have to wait. So I decided instead to offer a short review of The Captains. I knew little of William Shatner. I'd seen him as Captain Kirk in Star Trek and in The Twilight Zone. So when it came to viewing The Captains, a documentary written and directed by William Shatner, intrigued me. In The Captains, Bill Shatner interviews Patrick Stewart, Sir Patrick Stewart, Avery Brooks, Kate Mulgrew, Scott Bakula, and Chris Pine, the captains. With each of them, Bill takes them back to the beginning, their roots, what took them into acting, and what led them to being in Star Trek. In doing so, Bill Shatner found himself discovering more about himself. We follow Bill on his journey. We follow each of the captains on their journeys. The Captains is an incredibly insightful, heartbreaking, and at the same time life-affirming journey for anyone who is lucky enough to watch it. When I say lucky, I mean it. You do feel lucky to be on this journey. You feel lucky to be involved in these private moments shared with Bill about their private lives. Each of these actors open themselves up and talk about their fears when they first took up the role, opened up and spoke freely about the damaging work-life balance, the toll it took on their private lives. They speak openly about divorces and failing as parents and as partners. Every time I've watched the documentary, at least 4 times now, I am brought to tears. There are also insights from inside. Robert Picardo, who plays the Doctor in Voyager, gives his opinion of Kate Mulgrew on set. Nana Visitor, who plays Kira Nerys in Deep Space Nine, does the same for Avery Brooks. Connor Trenier, Charles Trip Tucker, and the third on the Enterprise for Scott. Also, an interview with Richard Arnold, former assistant to Gene Roddenberry, providing other insights from behind the camera, including how Gene Roddenberry was dead set against Patrick Stewart playing Picard. And it was only due to producer Bob Justman, who eventually convinced Gene to accept Patrick. That is true. And if you watch my documentary on the Blu-ray of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation, you can see an interview with actor Stephen Macht, who Roddenberry wanted to play Captain Picard. We get to see Bill Shatner at ease, having fun at conventions, interacting with the fans. When the original series finished and the convention started, both Shatner and Nimoy were not interested in going to conventions. They were both disgruntled at only being their characters. They were disgruntled at only being known for their characters on Star Trek. They both felt that as actors, they should be known for more than just a damn TV show. William Shatner, as he prepared to board the airplane heading to Canada to pick up the crew to make this documentary, met the owner of the airline he was going to be flying with. He told Bill that he became an aerospace engineer and started the airline after seeing him on Star Trek. Shatner had spent years dismissing this kind of comment, but this time it hit home and, combined with the research he was doing before interviewing Patrick Stewart, began to change his view of the character he played. William Shatner had an epiphany. He suddenly felt the impact that his character in the series he played had on other people, and for the first time, he was comfortable with being known as Captain Kirk. The documentary changed William Shatner's view of himself, made him more comfortable in who he is, and at the same time, the other actors got some insight into themselves as Bill took them back to the beginnings of their careers and to make connections and see themselves through Bill's eyes. Every Star Trek fan should see this documentary. Watching this documentary opened my eyes to the sacrifices that these actors have made to bring us the longest-running series of all time. 18-hour days with 20-minute lunch breaks, sacrificing any kind of work-life balance and damaging relationships with loved ones. Watching this documentary helped me understand William Shatner and to gain a great deal of respect for the man. For any Star Trek fan who has not seen it, watch it, allow it into your heart, and allow it to change you. Then watch For the Love of Spock. No need to thank me. Just watch and absorb. Ian Samuels. Well, Ian, a great letter. I share your sentiments. What a terrific documentary. I really like the captains. I, of course, know Bill a little bit. I haven't seen him in a while, but we did work together on a film, and we were going to work on another film, and I did produce the Star Trek 5 DVD. So I recorded a commentary of his and interviewed him, and yes, he did. I mean, you know, my own insight into Bill is that Bill was a guy who wanted to be an actor. Star Trek, he got typecast, and he didn't have the career he wanted, but he kept at it. And, you know, the guy has had more lives in show business than just about anybody. And the fact that he won 2 Emmy Awards, amazing. It's incredible. The guy's going to be 89 years old. Just astonishing. I think 89. I think he's 88 now. 89. But anyway, yes, the Captain's documentary is great. For the Love of Spock is great. And I would recommend, you said it as well as I ever could, or as good as I ever could, Ian. So thank you for that. That is the last of my letters. This is been a long chat. I hope Detective Jim has been cheered up by today's chat. I hope so, Jim. I want to thank you, by the way, for being a moderator as well, even on a day like today. Thank you to Greg Smith and to Mike Bodden for being moderators. If you like this chat, please like it. Please subscribe. go to Get Lucky Tiger and go to the website and see what they might have for you, especially if you have beards or mustaches, because I want to hear how that stuff is. I couldn't grow a beard or mustache to save my life. And if I did, I'd look like Santa Claus because it would be pure white. And remember to punch in PGS when you check out at getluckytiger.com and you get 20% off your order. This will bring an end to Robservations live chat number 190. I don't even remember what this is. 93 and 94. I've talked so much. I think it's 94. Can't believe it. 194. My God, all because of you imagination connoisseurs of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. As always, you can go to the website at theburnettwork.net and read these letters and respond to these letters, or you can comment here on YouTube. I want to thank everybody for being here. I will be back tomorrow. I am not on the John Campy show, but I will be back here at high noon with more scintillating letters. I'm getting more and more every day. It's getting harder and harder to find all these great letters because there's so many great ones. I'd be sitting here for hours and hours and hours, and hold me to the fact that we're going to do an 8-hour live broadcast on December 7th, all about Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That's all we're going to talk about. Well, we can talk about anything else too, but it's always going to come back to Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You know why? Because for 40 years, the human adventure is just beginning. That's why. And it's my favorite Star Trek movie. So there you go. And with that, I'm going to bring this chat to a close. And remember, as you always do, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I know there's not a lot of the day left. And for those of you in Europe, your day is gone. And for those of you on the other side of the world, like Timbula's Spider Monkey, your day is still happening. So isn't it great? We're a worldwide audience. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for supporting the Burnettwork. And thanks for supporting each other. And with that, I bid you farewell and say, have a better day.